All right, good morning, everyone. This is a work session which has been jointly scheduled by the Committee on Council as well as the Finance Exec Committee. Those are the two committees to which the legislation was referred dealing with the IG and ethics functions. I'm Howard Shook, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Isha Collins, Chair of the Committee on Council.
And so we're the co-conveners, I guess, here today. We're joined by Mr. Wan, Ms. Norwood, Mr. Westmoreland. I know Marta had a big breakfast presentation this morning, and so I'm sure we have members who are there, but then they'll get here as their schedules allow. So work sessions, are unlike committee meetings, unlike full council meetings, unlike public hearings. They follow a codified format, and we're going to stick to that today. And we only have 2 hours because at noon, the HR department requires this chamber for its new employee orientation process. So that's going to obligate me to be the chief clock watcher. So with that said, and without further ado, we have Ms. Manigault being up first, if you're ready. And both you and Ms. Sengova, who will follow you representing the Ethics Office, will each have 15 minutes, understanding that at any time, members can call you up for more questions or comments. We're joined by Mr. Amos and Mr. Winston, if you're ready.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having us here. I'm going to try to be mindful of the time. If you could give me a high sign around 5 minutes. The Office of the Inspector General was given 15 minutes to present today, and you have the slide deck before you. Hopefully that's been forwarded. There's not nearly enough time to go through all of the content of the presentation. So I'm going to spend just some time on the first slide because I think it really does tee up those issues that stay at the 10,000-foot level, and I'm happy to answer any of the more granular questions that you might have. The main question that should be presented today is, as the council president articulated during the FEC meeting on January 15th, what problems are we trying to solve? And it's an important question because there's been quite a bit made about how the Office of Inspector General conducts its operations, and that's been used as the basis for the formation of the task force and for the legislation. So it's worth just spending a brief moment on revisiting some of the issues that I've already brought to the council and to the public's attention about the problems with that task force. First, with its inception, that this was framed as something that was supposed to respond to both the issues articulated by the Office of the Inspector General and problems from the administration, but then it actually handled only one side of that it was framed as a joint issue based on a meeting that was had a week before the legislation was introduced. But then there was no notice to the Office of the Inspector General or the board about that legislation and some of the problematic underpinnings in its whereas clauses and its substantive clauses. Problematic in terms of the process of how it was executed, in terms of its staffing and how little time was given, if this was to be an earnest fact-finding endeavor, as anyone would hope, given the seriousness of the issues involved. And as a result of all of these process issues, too many to enumerate here, then you got the result that was inevitable, that the results were problematic, that they did not reflect best practices or industry standards or changes that would actually benefit the city of Atlanta. So to the extent that the legislation is based on problems identified by this task force, the task force recommendations really do need to be set aside wholesale. To the extent that the legislation is based on alleged abuses by the Office of the Inspector General, this too is an area where I've tried to correct the record time and time and time again. And the misrepresentations and lies about the office have only been repeated. So again, because it does bear repeating, we've never collected or searched anyone's personal property. We've never denied any employee a personal attorney in connection with our interviews. We've never withheld information or refused to provide board members with information. I added that last one because over the last few weeks, I've gotten privy to some of the information that's been shared with you council members about the office in briefings and in conversations, questions that have been raised, observations that have been made, where then when they've been brought to my attention, it's astounding. I couldn't believe that last one. They said, well, you know, you've been denying your board members information, and that simply has never happened. So there have been lies and misrepresentations that I've called out publicly. There are lies and misrepresentations that I know are happening behind the scenes, and all of this really begs a full, open, lengthy discussion that is public. And unfortunately, this isn't enough time to address all of those things. So to the extent that there is this notion that we need guardrails, that implies that we have somehow gone off track, and we have not. We have at all times operated in conformity with industry standards. We endeavor to follow the best practices, and we do so. So it begs this bigger question, why are we actually here? Why are we actually here? Some of you might remember, and I'm surprised that there hasn't been more attention brought to the timeline that was uncovered by Atlanta Community Press Collective. That is fairly telling about why we are here. We're here because the Office of the Inspector General has been doing its job. We have been effective in identifying where there have been issues of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in the city, and then making recommendations so those issues can be addressed. But a timeline was identified to try to change the legislation for this office. And it takes nothing for you to put together, based on the presentations that have been made by the administration about the nature of those changes. And indeed, what's before you today reflects those changes. So, like I said, there's not nearly enough time to go through the deck. What I tried to organize was those changes that would benefit the office and benefit the public, because there are actual problems that the Office of the Inspector General is trying to address, and juxtaposing those with the changes that are being proposed in the substitute legislation and the problems that are actually being created by those proposed changes. I'm gonna cede my time here because I think it's so very important that you hear about how offices of Inspector General should work, because you can't put the work of the City of Atlanta Office of Inspector General into context without knowing the bigger picture. The Association of Inspectors General, I know, has asked to be engaged with this process dating as early back as soon as the task force was formed, and it has largely been denied the opportunity for public engagement so that the public has the benefit of hearing the answers to the many questions that you have. So rather than me go on, I'd like to cede the rest of my time to the Association of Inspectors General.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I hate to say it, but 5 minutes remain.
5 minutes remain. Okay, well, I will, that's,
Now, I imagine you might well be asked questions by us.
that will be
when
fantastic.
it comes to.
Okay, so very quickly, the Association of Inspectors General is the national organization that produces the principles and standards for offices of inspectors general. We have over 300 offices, 2,500 employees. This is what we've been doing for 30 years. I have been doing this work, engaging with legislators for 4 years, 5 years just about. And I will tell you the unusual part of Atlanta is normally we are asked to engage, hours and hours and hours with different jurisdictions. In Atlanta, I've had a hard time getting to be engaged, especially in the public discourse. And I find that to be very interesting. It's different. That's not our normal experience. I don't want to bury the lead, but I would implore this committee to pause this, back up on this, engage with people who have actually been inspectors general and have lived this stuff and know how to fix it in a way that is productive. We've been saying and asking for that opportunity for a better part of a year, 8 months or so. And I again implore you to take advantage of that. We're good at this. I can assure you if the bill that is out today passes, it will not be in compliance with national standards. Doesn't even come close. And I would love to help solve those issues. I'm going to take the few minutes that I got left just to hit the engagement piece as best I can. We asked to engage with the council. We asked to engage with the task force. Both situations resulted in a couple of good discussions, several hours worth, all behind the scenes. I'll have those too. But they need to be held publicly. The public needs to hear how effective offices work. I think that the problem with the task force, and I know that has been defended quite a bit. I have nothing against any of the people on the task force. Great people, great resumes, lots of letters behind their names. Love it. That task force was flawed from the second it was enacted because the scope is off. We've been hearing about the Inspector General. I have since I was first contacted as chair of the Legislative Committee for the Association of Inspectors General about the scope and the issues. While the city has concerns with the Inspector General has concerns with the city. That task force was scoped one direction. What is wrong with the Inspector General's office? What can we fix at the Inspector General's office? It needed, and we've put this in writing to this body, we needed to have that scoped in such a way as we could also look at the city's engagement with the Inspector General. In order for this to work, that relationship has to be joint. They have to conform with one another. And the other thing I want to throw out there before my time runs out is that I did participate in a board retreat where there was no media there, but I spent, I think, over 2 hours on the stage with the chief of staff and several other high-ranking members of the city government. And I got to tell you, it was good discussion. They acknowledged it, I acknowledged it, and when I left that meeting, I suggested, we're going to meet more, right? All the stakeholders, the IG, everybody's going to meet. Yes, yes, heads nodding. And there was going to be meetings in January. And then this bill comes out. Maybe there were meetings I didn't know about, but this is never going to be solved and leave the city of Atlanta with a strong Inspector General's office, one that will survive the worst day in Atlanta. I'd rather have the IG doing the work than the FBI coming in. And that's what happens. I've seen it. I've gotten jobs that were created after the FBI marched in. The IG is a perfect tool for the government to self-correct itself, get a heads up on the problems that the IG finds, get the opportunity to fix it for themselves as opposed to indictments and external bodies making recommendations. So this is a great thing for the city. It's a great thing for the public. I am stunned that we are this close to dismantling an office that's already demonstrated it has the capacity to do good work. All because of some concerns. And look, if they're real, let's see it. Let's see the evidence. And if they're doing something wrong, I'll be the first one to say they need to fix it. But we are fixing problems that I have seen no evidence to back up. Now, I have not been in the Inspector General's files. That's not my job. But I understand that the positions that the Inspector General has taken, she has emails and things to back them up. So I'll see my time with that. Thank you. Or not see my time, I complete. Appreciate the opportunity. and I'll be happy to answer any questions from
All
anybody.
right, thank you. And we've been joined by Ms. Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Good morning.
We're now going to hear from, and we've also been joined by Ms. Bakhtiari and Ms. Lewis, who I already recognized. What? I'll sidebar in a second, but let's get Ms. Sengova up here, please.
For the sake of time, we wanted to at least have all the presentations to go through. And then if council, if you guys can hold your questions to the end, this is a working session where we want you all to get as much substantive information, and we understand that there are a lot of thoughts about this. So Councilman Lewis, do you mind if just holding your questions to the discussion, because we do want to maximize as much time as we can.
Thank you. Hey, Ms. Sengova, good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. All right, so let me go ahead and run through my presentation. Good morning, Chair Shook, Chair Collins, members of council. My name is Jabu Sengova, and I serve as the ethics officer. We do appreciate the opportunity to provide our feedback and revisions to the proposed charter amendments. And just to be clear, our suggestions and feedback is only applicable to Article 9. All right, so I'll just kind of run through the ones that, don't require much discussion. So in terms of course, the ethics function has been created in Article 9, which we do support. We do support that. We do have our own dedicated charter article now. First, Section 101F1 refers to a critical enforcement provision. And we're just asking that the word intentional be put back into the legislation. So it's just a really small fix. We've talked about with law, and we're hopeful that that will be restored to the legislation. All right, the next one concerns the board name and in terms of requirements. So the governing board is the existing name that we've been under. We're simply asking that that be restored to the Board of Ethics, which was the name prior to the 2019 charter creation of the OIG. And this name change is consistent with other ethics boards nationwide and will provide a visible distinction between our new board, our restored board, and the OIG board. We also have some concerns about Section 9104A, B 1 through 5, and that just really talks about the requirement that 3 attorneys serve on the board, 3 attorneys. So the issue with that is that as it stands right now, we only have the Gate City Bar Association, the Atlanta Bar Association, so it's very limiting in terms of making sure you have 3 attorneys on the board. And so, we want to bring to your consideration of adding another organization, and I'll get into that the next slide, which will make sure that the board is in compliance in terms of having 3 attorneys on the board. All right, the board appointment process. Now, we are asking the council, I know there's been conversation, and we have submitted, our concerns about that. We are asking the council to reconsider the proposed appointment process. It is important that we want to make sure that the board, as far as the ethics board, there's a truly objective standard over all ethics matters. The board should be comprised of disinterested parties that are free from any appearance of conflict. I have been in this role for 16 years, and, of course, prior to some of the changes, the structure did work. Now, Georgia State, we are proposing that the council replace the 2 proposed mayoral and council appointees with potentially Georgia State University and Georgia Tech, because those schools have well-established ethics programs. And not only that, they are best positioned to maybe provide an attorney. They have faculty that are familiar with ethics programs. So it could potentially meet the attorney requirement as well as provide really be able to oversee our ethics function. Another alternative we have proposed is, and this is just recently, is the Justice Center of Atlanta. Now, they are an Atlanta-based mediator and arbitrator training organization, and that organization has a high percentage of attorneys. So that could be potentially another seat that could fulfill not only the attorney mandate, but would give us the benefit of that appellate function, because our board primarily is an appellate board. In terms of the qualifications for the ethics chair, we do support having an attorney, but we would ask that 5 years of, the investigatory experience removed. And the reason why is that we believe that the chair position should be open to different legal backgrounds. So litigation, prosecutorial, ethics and compliance, which has worked in the past for us. We've had chairs with different legal backgrounds. And unlike the proposed OIG, our board routinely hears appeal matters. We've talked about due process. It's important that the chair is able to, has knowledge of legal processes and procedures, the rules of evidence, even though they're loosely construed in our hearings, but that is something that's important to us. And we need to make sure that the chair is able to effectively moderate and apply the city's ethics laws, and to avoid undue delays, confusion, or misapplication of the law, which will end us in Superior Court, which has happened before. All right, real quick, updates on open investigations. We are concerned about this particular provision because we do not feel that the board should be able to have detailed briefings on open investigations. Because again, our cases are never just completely finished and you have an investigative report. Our people that are subject to an investigation and a report, they have the ability to appeal. So you do not want the board to be privy to that case that they may have to hear later on. It's really a conflict. It's almost like asking a trial judge to oversee something, and then they're now the appeal, handling the appeal. So that's the reason why we said the board should not do that. That, I think, is rectified in Section 9105D2, which requires us to provide consistent reporting to the board, which we do already. All right, so this is why it's important that this is rectified. Last few things are investigations and final decisions. So we agree that a window to complete a preliminary review is important, but 30 days is too restrictive. We are proposing 90 days for consideration, and as well as that we do not believe that the board should be able to send the final report and decision to the mayor, council, and public. That, I think that is improper, and it compromises the position of an oversight body. You cannot have the same board really functioning as the arm of the ethics office. We should be able to send our reports, we do that, and if the council and mayor desires reports, we can provide that. So it could be upon request. Final thoughts. So our office continues to conduct our investigations with integrity and transparency, as we've done for 20 plus years, 22 years, and the rights of employees are acknowledged and respected. We do support the legislation that spells out the OIG cannot investigate matters under the purview of ethics. We believe that given our limited jurisdiction, we are not investigating fraud, waste, and abuse, and each oversight office performs critical complementary functions, and neither office should seek to dilute each other's authority. So part of us is really just making sure that the ethics function is protected. And to that end, we do believe that the legislation correctly and appropriately spells out the jurisdiction of the OIG and Ethics Office to ensure that we have timely and appropriate referrals of ethics matters. We're avoiding competing investigations, waste of city resources due to duplicate efforts, which was one of the things that was talked about 5 years ago, and we do not want to see that to continue, as well as unnecessary delays in investigations. And that's all I have for the committee.
Thank you. And you have left 5 minutes on the table. Here's what I would propose we do with that extra 5 minutes. I've already looked at the sign-up sheet. We have way more people than we will be able to accommodate today. And so when we get, and we're going to leave the sign-up sheet out there until it's public comment time, but we are going to have to make some adjustments as to and prioritize hearing from organizations, and hopefully we can have just a spokesperson if there's more than a couple people from any given organization, and then get to individuals. But so let's take that extra time and add that if we can. So now, all right, so now we're going to hear from the administration and the law department, and they are going to walk us through the proposed legislation and the changes that have recently been incorporated into the legislation so that we can all reorient ourselves.
It has also been brought to our attention that the ethics office, we're missing a couple of slides from the presentation that you just gave. So from my understanding, we're getting an updated slide deck to make sure that all council members have. So just give us a few moments to coordinate that and get that to you.
Thank you, because we
Okay.
did provide it, so thank you.
Yes, maybe 2 slides that was missing from what we have. Okay. Thank you.
Department, are we ready? All right, Law Department. Law Department.
Mr. Committee Chair, the Law Department's presentation is going to be after when we go through the details, but we're waiting for Chief of Staff Donald, who's going to do the administration portion of their presentation, and then we're going to go into the analysis of the changes. So if we can just wait just a minute, he's across the hallway, just takes him a little bit of time.
Okay, well, I would advise you to then reorient what you have to say because, you know, we're not giving anybody extra time up here.
Oh, we didn't need any extra time. So.
Well, then we can wait in silence if that's your preference.
I would like to wait for Judge Beer.
Hello, how are y'all doing this morning?
Good morning.
Still morning. All righty. Where's Lily? She have the folder. Thank you. All righty. All righty. Well, Council, thank you for allowing us to come before you today. Always excited to be here and talk about what is extremely important to our mayor, which is ethics and accountability. In 1 second, I'm gonna catch my breath a little harder to walk over here these days. Today, just wanna make sure we'll talk about a few very important areas just to make sure that we capture the administration's perspective on this legislation. Starting off, just saw the OIG's presentation, which I thought was right on target. We're all trying to answer the same question. What problems are we trying to solve here? And so we'll dive into that, as well as kind of how the legislation helps to solve those issues. Thank you so much. All right, so first question is, why are we here? Well, I've heard so much about this is a new issue and we're rushing the timeline. Well, back in May of 2024, our Madam OIG in office came and highlighted that there is an emergency, that we're trying to resolve some issues of pending investigations, perceived instructions, and of course, areas that we don't agree, for which we need to kind of clear those things up. It's about a year ago now. And so for this emergency, I think everybody has made it a priority. I'm sorry. Second piece is when we talk about what those issues are, is there are multiple ones. And when folks don't agree and we're not on the same page about things, we've got to get some clarity. And if the legislation does not provide us that clarity, we've got to be able to seek that. So many of our employees, because a lot of this is an employee issue, many of our employees are looking for guidance. They're fearful. I think you heard folks ask for a Bill of Rights and some guidance from the administration. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to work through. But we also see that there are some missing parts within the legislation that we need to provide. And so task force was put together to kind of help identify what some of those challenges are. We've also seen that you know, the governing board has even voiced a need for some of that clarity. I think I heard the board chair mention that, you know, almost, I guess when the legislation was created, that she asked and said that there should be guardrails. And so I want to make sure that we have those. And then I think city leadership has also just expressed the need to be able to call some balls and strikes. And so because of that, I think we're all in agreement that we need a little bit more. Peter, can you also make sure I get a copy so I can go through it quickly? So again, details of the problems and questions, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide for what you guys have just received. When we look at where we are, there's a lack of clear standard operating procedures for initiating investigations, and really no feedback loop on post-investigation. That's an area that I don't think we've talked about, you know, enough there, and an area that we're looking for. There are also some outstanding questions. You know, should targets be told their status as a witness subject to target? It's unclear, and it's unclear in SOPs as well. And so we need that kind of guidance. That can't go without being answered. And so there's nothing that is perfect about, you know, this endeavor. It all is a continuous quality improvement problem. You know, should they be compelled? I know that's been one question. Should it be voluntary? It's been a question of, you know, should we report on whether investigations are open or closed? Doesn't mean that we have all the answers to yes or no, but it means there's a question, and questions need to be answered. And I think that's a big part of where we are. Now, I'll tell you, I've also heard a lot about outright lies from the administration and from our employees. So much so, I've heard that nobody's house has been gone to unannounced. There hasn't been aggressive questioning. Well, I'll tell you, I think this video that you'll see here in a second, it's only 30 seconds, will show that an employee, a non-union employee who didn't have representation, did have an interview conducted on their home where they don't know if they're the witness of an investigation, the subject of an investigation, or even that there is a reason that some unnamed person is coming to their house. Didn't go to the governing board, so they didn't know that, so the oversight body doesn't know. And an investigator told an employee that they must exit the house to be interviewed. So, and I won't read the letter. I don't think I have a copy of it with me, but I gave a screenshot here just so that, you know what, let me go ahead and just read it for the edification of our public so that they know. I'm emailing you to put on the record that Shelby Williams, Deputy Inspector General, visited my home this afternoon without prior notice. I was notified that someone knocking at the door, but I chose not to answer due to the many voting solicitations that have come into my neighborhood. After a while, I went to check the door to remove any papers or anything that they had left behind, and found a business card left by Ms. Williams. See attached. Less than 3 minutes later, I received a no caller ID telephone call to my personal cell phone, not work, and reluctantly answered. She introduced herself, and I asked, "Did you just come to my home? Is that within your protocol? I don't think that's appropriate." She responded with, "Yes, it's within my jurisdiction." I asked her what this was regarding, and she said it was regarding the interview I had previously with two of her counterparts to discuss, and I won't say the name. She insisted on speaking in person, and I told her I was available today and I didn't feel comfortable speaking at my home. I'll pause there. So I'll go to the next slide. And let's see, I think we can play this 30-second video. I don't know how to do that. Somebody could play it for me. But I just want to make sure, and that's not a fabricated email. Would you mind coming up? Do you recognize that location right there? I'm just curious.
Yes, that's my home.
That's your home?
Yes.
Okay. And you work for the city?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't receive any prior notice?
No, I did not.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I want. I just want to make sure I wasn't making that up. I think that's been said as well. I'm not sure if we can press play, but there's 30 seconds of someone coming down the driveway. I don't know how to do it myself, but if those who have the video just press play, you can see that somebody's coming to the home.
Play the video.
If not, we can move on. It'll be publicly available after this meeting, so we can go back. I'm not sure. Okay. Next piece that we have some concerns about is the direct access to devices. And I think, again, I'll go through how these things are included in the overall legislation. But the OIG desires to have direct access for all city data and devices without any type of coordination or process in which we should pass those things, between our entities. There have to be necessary protocols in place. The Department of Law currently has to review the device and contents to retain the privileged status of information. So there is a such thing of attorney-client privilege, and as we have an independent board, you can't have a non-independent process for attorney-client privilege. That in itself appears to be a conflict. You also have IT responsibilities where AIM must review devices to ensure that both device and network security are maintained. And so you'd also imagine that police and others have highly confidential information on their devices that would need to be either removed, protected, or provided in a way that aligns with the law. And I'll get to how we want to make sure we align with the law here shortly. But HR must also review devices and contents to protect and remove sensitive information around FMLA and health information. I mean, I'll use myself as an example as going through the iPro process. The two highest ranking officials on the administrative side, myself and the mayor, have had our socials put out as a part of the iPro process from the OIG. There has to be some guardrails regarding how we protect our information. That can't happen. It just can't. And so this exchange of data and information is much bigger than just passing us trying to restrict or keep something. Listen, it's cost me money to protect my social security number. It cost me money to protect my credit and things of that nature based on a mistake of the city for which we're all liable for. Let's make that clear. While we're independent and we're talking about independence, that does not absolve the city of liability. So that's an important thing for us to be able to talk about and look at. Thinking in addition to data, which, is extremely important, this piece around the subpoenas is also very important. And let's make it clear, these administrative subpoenas for which that power and authority lies. So the OIG is an administrative entity per the city charter and state law. The OIG's subpoenas are administrative subpoenas under OCGA 7-1360. We want them to have that power and authority. Let me make that clear. I also heard the Office of the Association of Inspector General's remarks, strong remarks. They were great. But they also alluded to us wanting to get rid of the OIG in that office. It's never been proposed. Their board has said that. We've said that. Nobody has said that we want to get rid of it. But these guardrails are needed. And we talked about not doing something wrong. I think I'm going to highlight that we've actually have had some things go wrong. I think I highlighted one as a personal example for me and my mayor, but we also have some things around the use of subpoenas as well. So one, we believe that the city charter should clearly provide this same protection to cover financial, health, and telecommunications records. It's a pretty narrow ask. Let's make sure we're clear. That ask isn't taking away that power or anything, but it's making sure that there are guardrails to make sure that our staff and all involved are protected and that our liability, which we're responsible for, is not something that we creep into unintentionally. And when we look at that, I mean, there are a couple of examples, and I'll make sure that we share those with the council and they'll become public. But first, when we talk about this administrative piece, I want you to look at the law, because that's what this is. This is taken directly out of the law. what the law says, and we've heard in this new manual that the OIG posted, that did not go to her board, by the way, in January, this policy and procedures manual and these other materials actually say that were posted in January that these are administrative subpoenas and it's an administrative entity. Well, according to Georgia Code, you look at number 2, and I'll go to the highlighted subset. When these records and accounts are requested through subpoena or other administrative process issued by a state, federal, or local administrative entity having competent jurisdiction over the depositor, you go down to B, it means that unless directed otherwise by a court of competent jurisdiction, again, this is state law, before disclosure, production, or examination of records produced under paragraph 1 or 2 or subsection A of this code, the agency or other party seeking the disclosure or production of the records shall provide notification to the depositor or other customer of such request. Man, I found that interesting. When looking at that, of course, reviewing information, it's come to our attention that, I think we believe we do need guardrails because according to an open records request, the Office of the Inspector General has violated the state law that we just saw covered over 48 times in the actions to procure financial records where folks have not been notified. The subpoena tells the financial institution, and I brought an example. Mr. Pace, do we have that where we can share it with the council? They have it? Okay. So when you look at the example, the one example that we provided to you, it says that the financial institution, it tells them not to notify the account holder, and they didn't notify any of the persons whose records were sought or released. So that's an example of why you need guardrails. If you're not going to tell me, you're going to restrict the bank from telling me, wow. How do we, fix that? We fix that by adding guardrails. Go to the next slide. I'll go to the next one. Let's see, all righty. When we look at this, I think you heard from the ethics officer and there are other challenges, and I think this is what really brought our attention to this. Conducting investigations that fall under the jurisdiction of the ethics officer is a little bit confusing for us. Our focus is on making sure that we align with all of the ethical standards of the city and really exceed them. And I think you've seen that we spent, a lot of resources to make sure our 150, top leaders went through an ethics training that focused on preparing them for some of these unique circumstances. In addition to that, we have invited both the ethics officer and the OIG have presented to the city early on in the mayor's tenure. And in addition to that, when you look at the results of what has happened on the awards, the compliance and all of those things, even the number of the results of the findings and things of that nature, they've decreased around those areas. So for us, ethics is vital and important. But we also have to be able to call balls and strikes. And I think the ethics officer highlighted some of the challenges around jurisdiction. And that's important. Everyone has a role. It is not solely the ethics office alone. It's not the OIG alone. It's not HR or law alone or audit. They all play a role. And for us, we're looking for an opportunity to make sure we're calling balls and strikes. And what that really means is that we want to make sure that if the ethics officer has some requirements that we align with and it's their investigation, we don't get confusing information from the OIG or audit or law. It's all got to play together, and we have to understand where folks' jurisdiction lies. Final piece is just around, not the final piece, but how we process. So when we look at the different approach, it's just, the focus is on ensuring that we make the city better. And there's definitely a part of, we call it, the simple, stupid way of doing things. When you mess up, you fess up, and you improve it and make things better. And so when we have done something that is unethical, we want to make sure that we identify what it is, we improve on it, and then we eradicate that from how the city does things. One great example is the issues that were brought forward by the OIG. I think there was somebody who took a low-level bribe or something of that nature. I don't know, it was missing, but we actually self-identified that and reported it. That's how it works. That's the right way. You see a problem, you report it, they fix it, they root out their waste, fraud, and abuse, and then they tell us how to do it better. And that's what we want. But a big part of making the city better is also maintaining and improving on the public trust. And while these processes are pretty clear and they help with jurisdiction, the approach to make the city better, and really what's in the city charter, doesn't necessarily mention a PR firm at over $100,000. So I'm questioning and making sure that we understand what our intent should be, because we're focused on improving for the city, not so much highlighting and causing catastrophes. To that end, when we look at the example, I got a little bit more time. As we look at the example of oversight.
No, hang on.
There are also,
Excuse me. So they have 30 minutes. Same 30 minutes that the two subject agencies had, the same 30 minutes we're going to have, the same 30 minutes for public comment. So that's the fairest way we could apportion it. You are down to your last 10 minutes. Now, this is time that we also expected to be able to have the law department walk us through the draft.
I've got 2 more minutes. Would I get a pause from where I was and starting from there? I know that there was a public interruption.
I regret the need to interrupt, but please continue.
Thank you. You know, as we close out, the example of the lack of oversight, because the board piece is another area that is extraordinarily important. Heard that there wasn't a purchase of spy pens and things of that nature, and all of these things didn't happen. So I just want to make sure that I share, again, when we look at this need for guardrails, this is directly from the procurement office, the 15 spy pens that were purchased, for which there is no public SOP for on how those were used. And I would remind you that in Georgia, you may be a single recording agency, but our practices have always been to let somebody know when they're being recorded. And without a public SOP, I'm not sure we can actually do that. And so that's important, because we're not just talking about regular cameras and things of that nature. I don't know, spy cameras is a little different. I think I highlighted the next slide, which is just the more than $100,000 that went to the PR services, which I think are fine, but want to make sure that all of those things go before the board, the governing board, which they may or may not have. Not so sure about the spy pens. Finally, the most important part is just the employee rights piece. The OIG's statement and approach isn't necessarily consistent with the current city charter. And when we talk about best practices, I wanted to make sure that we highlighted some. And so the substitute proposed legislation seeks to make sure that we create some of this much needed clarity around key items to create protections for employees. And that is vital and extremely important that we protect our employees. The legislation also answers critical questions and is supported by a clear rationale for national standards. And so I wanted to highlight some of those here, because we're talking about national standards, but we want to make sure that we know what those are. One, should an interviewee be employed, should be informed of the status and general topic of the area at hand? Our proposed answer is yes. We've explained the rationale. When you look at multiple federal, state, and local bodies, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, their answer is yes as well. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of these, but I will have a question as I begin to turn it over to law to kind of answer. Well, one other thing about best practices, this might be the most important part. All of these best practices change over time. If you look at this example that's on the screen here, if you look at U.S. law, something that was changed in 1985, it was common law, the fleeing felon rule. It was a best practice upheld by law enforcement that you could use force, even deadly force, against an individual who's suspected of a felony and is in the clear right. So you could shoot this person in the back. At one time, that was legal while they're fleeing. We wouldn't go for that now. So that was a best practice then. Best practice, it's a continuous quality improvement environment. We want to get better every day. So we can't get scared away from doing the right thing and improving things and protecting employees just because it's not popular. And I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that. And I think my last question, because that definitely impacts employees. Look, I got my pen on. We standing with the OIG. We hope that she doesn't go anywhere. But at the same time, who's going to stand with our employees? I think it's us. With that, I'll pause and let Law, I think Ms. Robinson is going to go through the substitute line by line, and I'll pause there.
Thank you, and we do not have time to go through the draft line by line.
Or
So, Ms. Robinson,
changes.
if you could point out the changes, the most recent changes that are currently in the document.
Yes. Good morning, Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta, Department of Law. So there was a substitute that was brought forward by the Finance Executive Committee on January 15th, 2025, which addressed certain concerns that had been raised concerning the makeup of the boards, the two boards that would govern the OIG and the Ethics Office respectively, and concerning the use of the word corruption throughout the legislation in reference to the jurisdiction of the OIG. Concerning the use of the word corruption, it had been struck from the substitute, from the legislation as originally read in. In the substitute, it was restored in the two places where it previously occurred, Section 8-101B and Section 8-106B2. In 8-101B, the language provides that a purpose of the Office of Inspector General article of the charter shall be to investigate allegations of waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption. Additionally, clarifying language is added to the substituted section, which reads as follows. Investigations conducted by the Office of the Inspector General are administrative in nature, and neither the Inspector General nor the deputies, assistants, employees, and personnel assigned to the Office of Inspector General shall have the powers and abilities of law enforcement officers as defined in state law, including the ability to conduct criminal investigations. In Section 8-106B2, which concerns the initiation of investigations by the Compliance Division of the OIG, the word corruption is restored such that the Compliance Division of the Office of Inspector General shall have authority to initiate and conduct an investigation concerning waste, fraud, abuse, or corruption. In regards to the makeup of the boards, as proposed in the original legislation as it was originally read in, the boards would all be subject to mayoral appointment with council confirmation and then subsequent mayoral approval of the legislation. The substitute changes this such that certain community organizations would still have, as is currently the case, direct appointees to the board, which are subject to council confirmation and mayoral approval, but the particular persons cannot be changed by either the mayor or the council prior to the confirmation process. So the OIG board would be made up of nominees of the Atlanta Bar Association, the Gate City Bar, the Atlanta Business League, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the full city council, and the mayor. The ethics board would be made up of nominees by the Atlanta Bar Association, the Gate City Bar Association, the Atlanta Fulton County League of Women Voters, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, the full city council, and the mayor. Both of these would still require that the chair of each board would be an attorney, but I do want to point out that there are no requirements for any particular number of attorneys to be appointed to either board. The difference is that the OIG board would include the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and the Atlanta Business League as nominating entities, while the Ethics Board would have the League of Women Voters and APAD as nominating entities. In both instances, in the substitute that is before you, the universities and Association of Public Accountants have been removed, and the full council and the mayor have been given a nomination each. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Right on time. So as was previously mentioned, there are 4 extra minutes that I think we've agreed to give to the public. And so could we have the sign-up sheet? And so what we're going to have to do, I'm sure there are many more people who have signed up than we can hear from because we do have to close out the public comment portion at 11:30 so that the council has its 30 minutes to ask its questions. And so what I'm going to propose is if there are multiple people here from any particular organization, that the ranking member or a spokesperson only speak for those people so that we can hear from as many people as possible. I think it makes sense that we hear from stakeholder organizations, that we also prioritize them, and to the extent that we can, then we'll start cycling through individuals. Okay, so let's start with, I see some union leadership here, so I hope that y'all are prepared to speak in a leadership role and represent your people. Please have them stand so that we can see everybody. Everyone's going to have the same 2 minutes, just like a council meeting, and we are not going to be able to allow time donations here today. So, Ms. Pagnata Murphy, if you're ready.
I can't get 5 minutes as a leader?
No, ma'am.
Union like everybody else did?
Not today.
Okay, well, we'll bring that up at the next FEC.
Now, that said, everyone obviously should feel free to send us, any comments, any submittals that you may have.
Somebody want to pass this out for me, please?
Yeah, someone will get it.
So we're going to be strategic since I only have 2 minutes and I have my board to stand up here. So when I get time and my time runs out, then the next person's going to come in and take over the next part. Would that work? I see head.
Y'all have 2 minutes. Let me put it to you that way. Your organization has 2 minutes.
Okay. So my name is Gina Pagnata. I'm president of PACE, Professional Association of City Employees. I'm also a vice president of our national organization of NAGE. It is this union's commitment to partner with administration, council, ethics, and ODR to foster alignment with the city ordinances and ensure all employees, classified and unclassified, have the right to have representation during any investigation conducted by their office and should not be by OIG. This right for representation is a fundamental protection for our members and all employees as an essential part of a fair investigative process. To deny employees this right is undeniable, not due process. While police officers arrest an alleged criminal, it is due process for that arresting officer to read to that citizen the Miranda rights, which means the legal rights of a person being arrested to remain silent and have an attorney present. We're not criminals. We're administrative of people, of employees that may do something wrong as far as coming to work too late, not doing stuff on a hot top dollar amount of fraud, waste, and all of that. This is based on our Fifth Amendment, on your Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. If this Constitution is respected and it's in a potential criminal process, then why does OIG have the privilege to be beyond and above this Constitution, especially since it's an administrative process in which the employee's rights are stated in the City Codes of Ordinance? Remind you, Section 114.522, Section 114.530B4, our MOU, page 11, rights to representation, page 11, rights to representation of all employees. Commitment of advocacy. During the meeting with OIG in 2023, I met with Shannon Mangault. Response to my email, she stated, continue, Debbie.
All right, thank you. No, I'm sorry if I was unclear.
Oh.
That's 2 minutes for your entire organization to be represented
Oh,
I was
really?
hoping by leadership.
They signed up to, what kind of work session is this, sir?
It's one that,
Okay, we called
It's
and
one that
everybody
follows
called.
city
She
code.
signed, everyone signed up.
I
So they
understand.
don't get a 2-minute, that was not clear. And that's unfair. That's really unfair. And we should be respected as a union leader of this organization for many years with you all. We should
Ma'am,
have the right to be
I
able to
understand,
speak.
but we're trying to get to as many people as possible, and to the
But
extent
then
that there
you
are,
gave me 2 minutes while she can't speak. She signed up.
because
she's an employee and a-
you are
executive
speaking on
board.
behalf of your organization.
That is so unfair.
But that's the way, I mean, this isn't a committee meeting.
Where is that in writing? I thought
It's
this
in
was
the
a
code.
working session.
It is,
That we asked for.
and that's in the code. It's codified.
Well, I'm asking
process.
all of the people that we endorse for election and we endorse
Right.
to do a vote to say that we have an opportunity to speak and finish what I have to say.
All right, but Ms.
That's not fair.
Yeah, Ms. McDonough, everyone is invited to communicate with us. Send us your submittals, send us your emails.
Well, we're here to speak and everyone is
I
signed
understand
up.
that. Well, and a lot of people are here to speak, and we'd like to hear from as many of them as possible.
Then that's why I asked for 5 minutes. What is for 3
No,
more minutes?
But we're not, because then 2 other people
I
can't
already see
speak.
where this is going. But remember, you got elected.
Thank you. Mr. Thornhill.
I already see what you're doing.
Since you're just going to let one of us speak, we're going to let Ms. Jeffrey speak for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, let's start the clock when she begins speaking. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am Crystal Jeffrey, Secretary Treasurer of AFSCME, Georgia. I want to address a serious concern regarding investigative procedures within the Office of Inspector General. It has come to our attention that some employees are being denied their right to union representation during investigation and interviews. Let me be clear, this is a direct violation of the city charter, and it must be corrected immediately. Employees have the right to request a union representative when being questioned in a way that would lead to a disciplinary action. This right is not optional, and it should never be ignored or obstructed. Additionally, conducting investigative interviews at an employee's home is both inappropriate and unprofessional. Furthermore, employees must be informed at the very beginning of an investigation whether they are a witness or a subject of an investigation. Transparency is key to maintaining trust and fairness in this process. Without it, we risk creating an environment of confusion and fear rather than one of accountability and integrity. Failing to follow these standard protection erodes trust, and it puts the city at risk. We need immediate corrective action to ensure these rights are upheld. I urge each and every one of you to take seriously and know that employees must be treated with respect and their rights must be upheld. There's no exceptions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next 3 are Gerard Jackson, followed by Tiffany Roberts, followed by Minister Breedlove.
Those people were signed up to speak with AFSCME.
Okay, thank you. Amy Stout?
Mr. Chair, I'm Tiffany Roberts from Southern Center. I wasn't speaking with AFSCME.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No worries. I will be really brief. My name is Tiffany Roberts. I'm the Public Policy Director at the Southern Center. As you all know, we have already submitted multiple writings regarding this legislation. Thank you for holding this work session. I want to point out just a couple of things that we're concerned about beyond our written comments. Southern Center is staffed by lawyers who have practiced extensively in criminal and civil law. We find ourselves to be unique in that respect, and so I'm going to frame this using our expertise. Starting with Section 8101B, so the language of the substitute prohibiting the OIG from conducting criminal investigations is ambiguous because there's really no way for us to define when a criminal investigation commences because things violate criminal, administrative, and civil law at the same time quite often in the law. law. So when does one start? When does one conclude? When will we would decide that an investigation is improper? Also, we stated that the violation of the Open Records Act is probably the most glaring example of one such violation that can be at once criminal, civil, and administratively impermissible. We want to point out that the communications about the implications of the Garrity case as it pertains to compelled statements is conflating the introduction of statements in criminal proceedings and the use of information and statements for criminal investigations. Garrity pertains only to statements to be introduced in court. So it does not prohibit the OIG from forwarding information to law enforcement, which means that we're telling employees that this framing protects them from criminal prosecution. That is also inaccurate. And then subpoenas are governed, administrative subpoenas are governed by OCGAA 71360. And that already prohibits the bank from notifying the subjects when there's a criminal investigation. So we'll brief this and send this to you, but I'm hopeful that you can discuss these things during this work session. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stout, followed by Kiana Jones-Moore.
Remember that show Cheaters? One of my favorite episodes, the guy got busted and he goes, well, if you were doing your job, I wouldn't have to step out on you. What does that got to do with this council? One of my neighbors wrote his elected city council member and said, I object strongly to the gross changes in the charter that this ordinance, and the council member responded, I agree. I've contacted the administration and I can't get any response. Maybe I don't understand the process, but I thought the city council passed legislation. It appears to me you're not doing your job. I beg of you, do not pass this. I promised myself I would be calm, cool, and collected, but I feel very passionately about this. This is an outrage. The mayor brags about drawing circles. He's drawing a very small circle around the office of Inspector General, putting that office in a cage. We need this office to be independent and empowered, not defanged. And if the Inspector General doesn't find the problems, Trump's Justice Department will be coming to Atlanta. You know how he feels about this city. And do you like my shirt? The planning department prepared these for the city of Atlanta. The planning department, they want to engage citizens to be involved in Plan A and the CDP rewrite. And they've had this vast community engagement process, and they prepared these shirts. Well, I fixed it. The future of Atlanta is going to be more waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse if this charter change is passed. And you want people to be engaged in the city planning process. Why should they bother? If it doesn't matter, if people just do whatever they want, why will they be engaged?
Thank you. Kiana Jones-Moore, followed by Nathan Clubb. You are, and I skipped you. I'm sorrier. So, yep. Come on up.
Praise God. Hallelujah, children. It's a lot going on. I came here today a long time. I'm so glad that you all are here today. I'm an old farmer, an old missionary, 43 years. I suffered in this city. I was arrested as a missionary to help thousands of people. Many of them here since today know me for giving them monies to help them out of poverty. In 2002, there was $250 million in Parmesan monies that was abused under the administration of Bill Campbell and many others. And I was arrested on a house that wasn't even my home because I had money and I was helping English Avenue be revitalized. It took me all these years to come back to tell you that I'm asking for justice. I have tried and spent so much money, almost died at a size 0, left my children for years, gave up everything I had. And I was a sad person sitting on a UPS hand cart in Thomasville, Georgia, that I knew nobody, and I missed my children and grandchildren. But today, I'm here to tell the world, never give up on yourself. God bless you. I have the statement and everything on this jump drive to give it to you, young man. And you're going to do what is right toward this, to help the poor people, restoration for us. And the Land Bank Authority need to be investigated from 1999 up to now to give the black people their properties back. In Jesus' name. I love you and God bless y'all. And we pray for what happened today in Washington, D.C. about that airplane. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Well, here I am at a joint work session for two committees of the Atlanta City Council, and we're talking about the Office of the Inspector General that is charged with investigating issues of waste, abuse, fraud, and corruption. And it is no surprise to me that throughout this proposed legislation, the word corruption would be the one that's in question. The word that we want to qualify and the word that we want to try to quantify. Corruption is corruption. It ain't no little bit, it ain't no lot of bit. It is what it is. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. And if you're not right, you are wrong. But when it comes down to the Office of the Inspector General, what I find with this body is that y'all are doing some of the things that y'all accuse people on the other political side from you of doing, like repeating the same thing as if it's going to make it true. You're repeating the same lies, and it don't make it true. The Inspector General went to the home of someone who was working from home, so then that's their work location. The Inspector General has requested access to city electronic devices, city-owned, so that's not personal property. But we keep repeating these lies to try to say, oh, the Inspector General's office is so bad. Why? Because y'all didn't do y'all's job of investigating someone and paying attention because somebody decided to hire their child who didn't do their job, then try to retaliate when the child was called to the carpet and it got out in the news. That's your fault. You were sent communication from the Office of the Inspector General. You ignored it. That's what made the Inspector General show up here at a meeting in May. And y'all still didn't want to listen, tried to shut her down then. But again, you repeat the lies. And all I want to know is how long y'all gonna repeat Andre's lies? And why y'all so scared of him? He got a gun to your mama's head. He threatening your children. He's a man just like you. Stop being scared and do the right thing.
Nathan Clubb.
Thank you all. Nathan Clubb. I am a resident of District 1 in Ormwood Park. And I just want to come here and talk because my background, my experience is working on government oversight and accountability. I have over a decade experience working on performance audits, special examinations, that kind of stuff. So I think that gives me a little bit of a unique perspective on, what are kind of some of the essential things that the OIG needs in order to be able to operate effectively and efficiently. I'm happy to see some of the amendments that have come through on legislation, but I still have some concerns. I know we are short of time, so I'll just try to speak briefly on the things that I think are kind of most concerning. Independence. It's essential for any IG's office to have full, complete independence. Otherwise, how can they feel safe and dedicated to their job? I'm happy to see that there was amendments to change how the board nomination and confirmation process is. The original legislation was very concerning from that perspective. When it comes to access to information, if you're going to do any sort of this type of work, you need to have full, complete access, unfettered access to information. Not only do you need the full access to information, you need to have it in a timely manner so you can access it and use it when it's relevant. So you don't have investigations or anything like that being held up while you're waiting for this valuable information to come from you. When I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about people's personal property. I'm talking about, public records, public documents, public computers, public files, public financial data. Lastly, the ability to initiate any and all needed investigations. It's really important for there to be a detailed process, but it's important for them to be able to decide what investigations they believe need to go forward. And when it comes to this whole thing about trying to prevent them to refer or look into criminal investigations, yeah, they might not be criminal investigators, but you have no idea when you're having an investigation whether it's going to lead to the discovery of any sort of illegal criminal activity. So I think it's essential to allow them to be able to retain their ability to refer any of those matters for criminal prosecution. Thank you all for your time.
All right, thank you. Next is, I'm reading Minister White. Last name is definitely White. And followed by Kristen Folsom. Is Mr. or Ms. White here? No? Is that you? Okay. Go ahead.
I'll be really quick. My name's Kristen Folsom. I'm from the English Avenue community. I just wanted to make a note about the incoming president who stepped in and on Friday night fired 12 inspectors general. And I urge all of you to ask yourself, or go read an article, any article, and ask, why did he fire 12 inspectors general? What is there to hide? And I just want to say that the Office of Inspector General, in and of itself, is a check and balance, and it defers a lot of corruption before it even starts, just by virtue that employees know that they can be investigated, and it will deter a lot of corruption that happens in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gloria Hawkins Wynn.
Is it still morning? Good morning, all. Councilmember Lewis, who's my representative, as well as Councilmember Winston, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Gloria Hawkins Wynn. I live in MPUI. I'm also a delegate appointee from the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. APAB is one of those entities that is, I would allege, is coming under attack vis-a-vis this new legislation. Let's just talk about the gut feeling of this. Many of us in the last decade plus observed city officials handcuffed indictees who in plain view were living lavish lifestyles that gave notice to anyone who would look that there's a problem. That is the genesis of the OIG's office. And we want you all to continue to remember that. Some says, well, you know, the criminal kind of tracking, is there probable cause? Is there articulable suspicion for her to act? We know that if you take it to a trier of fact or jurist, based on whatever evidence is presented by an officer, that jurist then can issue a warrant. That jurist can issue something that requires or gives authority to move just based on the allegations alone. And that is the kind of independency that the OIG's office deserves and needs. Again, if I just quickly speak, reject this proposal to limit the authority that is so needed. And again, just look back within the decade of those 10 indictees right at the top of the food chain, right within the annals of City Hall. So we just ask you to, just the spirit, because what this seems like is a power play that is designed to quash the spirit of oversight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Next is Skylar Akins, followed by Darian L. Eschman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I worked for the city of Atlanta for nearly 10 years. I was here when Katrina Taylor Parks was famously held out and charged and served federal prison sentence. I was here when Jim Beard was hauled out of the city hall and indicted for laundering weapons through the Atlanta Police Department. I could go on and on and on, but I only have 2 minutes here. If you guys weaken this office, I want to warn you, the FBI might as well set a shop up down the street, because I know this mayor loves to say that he runs an ethical, efficient, he's got this tagline that he used. But let me remind you of something. The very last meeting, the city attorney brought a pile of documents here. The last time that happened was when Mayor Kasim Reed famously brought a room full of documents and said, here are all the documents related to the federal probe here at City Hall. And we now know there were documents not there that eventually led to nearly a racketeering and conspiracy charge for several people here. There was a lot of evidence during that time to indicate that there was a conspiracy and a racketeering operation happening right here. I got in the hall with FBI agents, going up and down elevators when I worked here, and eliminating this office in any way, in a rushed way, is irresponsible. I have no words for it. And not only that, it feels like political retaliation because I know 2 or 3 council members here, because it's in the report, it's public, I'm not alleging anything. 2 or 3 of you guys are being investigated, so how does it look like this isn't history repeating itself? And again, I have respect for everyone. 99% of employees that work here and come to this office every day, 99.9% of them do the right thing every day. It's only the 1 or 2 bad apples, especially tends to be the higher ones up the totem pole. So I ask that you reject this in its completeness and remember that if you do this, it's history repeating itself.
Thank you. Darren L. Eschman.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Darren L. Eschman. I've been an investigator for about 37 years. So if you got this office, the FBI would be here within a year or sooner. Now, the OIG is here to keep us safe. We're here for the city. So my thing is, if OIG is going to be accused of taking people's personal cell phones, and can you produce those people? If you're going to accuse someone of something, can you at least produce it? Produce those people to say, they took my phone. They took my device. As far as fleeing felon, whoever suggested fleeing felon can be shot, I suggest they read Gardner versus Tennessee. That's the law, okay? So if you got this office, I predict the FBI will be here. And guess what? They're not gonna tell you that you're under investigation. They're not gonna do it. And there are no secrets, gentlemen and ladies. There are no secrets. There's no secrets. So if you got this office, you do yourself and the city a disservice. It's just not fair. It looks so bad on TV. It's like I'm in the Trump administration here when I come here. It looks so bad. I'm so sad about it. You can do better. But if you got this office, I predict that the FBI will be here. And they're not going to ask you before they come. They don't need to tell somebody they're under investigation or can I get the subpoena. They have administrative subpoena. It takes 2 minutes to get that subpoena. It's signed and sent instantly. So you guys are cutting your face off to spite your nose. Again, if somebody's going to accuse OIG of taking devices, produce those people. Make them come here before us and say this. If somebody's at home, right, and they working from home, and OIG go to their house, make them explain why. That's all I have to say. Have a good day.
Thank you. Nicola Hines.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm actually speaking on behalf of another board member that could not attend today, Board Member Terry Simmons. So I'm going to read her letter, and I am passing out some information. Also, I did forward an email from also Board Member Andrew Cohen and his statements today. Dear members of Council and Mayor Dinkins, I write to express grave concerns with the proposed legislation concerning OIG, ethics, and the governing board. While I appreciate the efforts of the task force, council, and administration, further engagement from subject matter experts, OIG, and ethics needed prior to any legislative changes. The legislative proposals drastically threaten the independence of functionality of the governing board, OIG, and ethics. Notably, many proposals were not recommended by task force directly contradict the 2024 task force report and or the 2019 task force responsible for the creation of the OIG, remove unique and necessary powers of OIG and ethics that exist under current legislation. The task force did not recommend the additional of mayor or council appointees to the board. Further, they did not propose the removal of any nominating entities or changes to the qualifications for the chair. By mandating mayoral and council appointees, the proposed legislation compromised the independence of the governing board by allowing outside influences and conflicts of interest. These proposals work to weaken the governing board's independent oversight. Proposed legislation directly compromises the independence of the offices by giving the governing board functions that should be reserved exclusively for the OIG and/or ethics. More specifically, proposed legislation removes the power of OIG to make law enforcement referrals, giving the governing board the sole authority. Repeatedly, the task force warns the governing board to not insert itself or other compromising ongoing investigation, emphasizing that the interference with details of investigations or findings should be avoided, as it risks compromising the independence of both the OIG and ethics officer. While proposed legislation mandates the opposite, it requires the disclosure of confidential information to the governing board during the pendency of investigation. The intent behind the 2019 task force and current legislation is abundantly clear. It's to consolidate city investigation functions by forming the OIG and gave both offices necessary and unique features. Of those vital features were direct subpoena power, the elimination of vacations.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay, sorry, I had one more
we
sentence.
didn't let you know that your time had
Okay.
expired.
Thank you.
Eric Foley.
Hi. First, I want to point out that we're at City Hall at 11 a.m. on a Thursday. This is not outside working hours like was mentioned at the last meeting. The appearance is that public input is being stifled while passing legislation that makes corruption easier. The task force was predicated on 2 complaints, taking personal cell phones and showing up to people's houses. The chief of staff tried to expose the OIG by showing a video of them showing up to an employee's house, but the IG said in an interview with WABE that's still online that they did this twice. This was not a revelation, it was political theater. The part about taking personal phones, well, the mayor's office had to take down a video making that claim because it could not be substantiated. If these procedural concerns that were talked about were the actual concerns, the amendment could have been 2 points. The interviewees must be informed of their rights, and the inspector general may not appear at someone's house without prior agreement. But these aren't the points that I'm concerned about. Requiring to inform subjects of investigations about the investigation, warning people that they're being investigated makes it easier to hide, and again makes it easier to do corruption. The mayor and council having power to appoint and confirm board members, this doesn't address any of the original complaints, and it gives the people that should be having the oversight power over them. Nowhere in this task force legislation or working session do we address the IG's comments on May 20th about obstruction and obstacles in her investigation. These seems to be ignored by the task force. The public concern overwhelmingly is stopping fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption in a city that has a history of it. These changes would make it easier to do corruption right now by stripping the IG's power to conduct effective investigations, and the Boyd appointment process changes would make it possible to make corruption systemic and hidden. Overall, this is not a power struggle between 2 equal parties. The IG does not hold the levers of power in the city. She does not have power over the budget. No one would offer her free hotel rooms during big events. She doesn't have the ability to create fake reimbursements for $2,500 for her friends. She cannot assert her influence over vendor selection and give her friends favorable contracts that pay triple the amount of the original legislation.
Thank you. DeJuan Robinson.
Good morning, board. I'm sure you guys have this this attachment. It's a hard day for me because I've been on the side of fighting for employees, speaking out against ethics, standing with OIG on many things, and speaking out on the mayor's office whenever there's a controversial issue, but not calling them corrupt, but they're speaking out against it for the people. Many times I've been right, sometimes I've been wrong. This here is dead wrong. I don't do no business with the city. I am not a city vendor. I don't have no contracts with the city. There are some things that I may do in my personal life. I may go get a massage and it might end up with a happy ending. It ain't the OIG business. It ain't council business. It ain't nobody business what I do. During this time from 2021 till now, my bank accounts have been subpoenaed. It could have been $250,000 to $500,000 coming in my account. Ain't got nothing to do with city business. I do a lot of personal business. What I do for myself and my happiness is not the OIG business. And this here, for me, is very dangerous. I spoke out once upon a time about your nonprofit organization, Mr. Juan. I've been questioned a few times about, do I know this? Do I know that? That's Mr. Juan. I didn't speak out against it from a corruption standpoint. They're stating that, you know what I'm saying, you have a nonprofit, different things. Subpoenaing someone bank account information who don't work for the city, don't do no work with the city, that is very dangerous. I don't mind, I'm not above reproach, but to be subpoenaing my records, having my bank account information when nobody don't know this, but to have this publicly, hey man, that's dangerous, man. That's very dangerous, and I'm serious. And I stand with the mayor's office when they say nobody trying to get rid of her, but guardrails, man, subpoena power is very dangerous, and I'm very appalled at this, and I'm not one who want to scream lawsuits and law, but this here, my information, I don't play about that. This is very dangerous.
Thank you. All right, we have now heard from all the individuals and at least the spokespersons of all the organizations represented here. I want to just acknowledge how uncomfortable some of this has been for everyone. I try to be as fair as I possibly can, and that brings us to our last 28 minutes, which is reserved for council to ask questions and discuss among ourselves where we think we are, express our concerns, air possible solutions. Ms. Bakhtiari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Give me a moment to get my notes together. One of the first things I wanted to ask about, because of something that I've consistently heard about is employees not knowing their rights, and that is accurate. Not many of our city's employees, I would say most of our city employees, are not as informed as this body, and so we have to make sure that they are aware of their ongoing rights. So one of my questions is, would it be possible to essentially Mirandize or require the office to read rights so they understand that they can have a union rep with them, or they can understand they can have a lawyer with them? Would that be something that we could consider? And law, would you be able to advise if that is possible? You turned it off.
Anyone from Department of Law want to answer that or provide any guidance on that?
I believe the city attorney is addressing this.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
So the question revolves in terms of, and Liliana, please make sure I'm stating it right, understanding the rights that should be afforded to employees based on any investigations that are happening. Almost, I hate to use the word Mirandize because you do get into a criminal, you get into a whole different book of evidence.
I think of that as a synonym.
Yes.
Under the state law, they are able to, I'm going first, city. The city compels cooperation. And as a result of the compelling of cooperation, every employee is supposed to participate, give full access to information involving the matter that they asked. So the employee is not told that they basically, the statements will be used against them. Currently, they are given a statement that says this is voluntary and they're required to sign it.
Well, my understanding is if it's voluntary, it can be. If it's compelled, it cannot be used against them in a criminal investigation. If it's voluntary, they can.
It is compelled because the city code made it compelled. So you can't go off the city code and create your own statement or form that says, oh, it's voluntary when it's not. That employee can be terminated.
Yes, so my question is, can we require that the office read out the rights when they meet with the employee?
Yes.
So we can do that. So essentially, so they're aware that they can have a union representative, that they can have a lawyer to understand the way the case is running, all of that. So just so that they're aware and better informed.
Right, and to acknowledge the OIG's efforts, last month or early this month, she just released a policies and procedures handbook that now contains the fact that they can get an attorney and they can have the union rep. Union attorney. It does exclude the union representative, which is part of our MOU, and we would encourage that you, as a city who signed it, add that. But at least there's an acknowledgement of that change is necessary.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then another thing is I've noticed there's not a clear definition of ethics, or I think that we should be working on a clear definition of what ethics jurisdiction is and the OIG, because we want to eliminate the possibility that their investigations can overlap and they can tamper with each other to better protect both offices.
Yes.
So I'm asking that we also consider that as we're moving forward in this paper as well.
Do you actually want the definition? Because we did separate the functions. Okay, the definition.
No, I was going to say, yes, I think it is separated in
It
the
is.
actual legislation. If you can give us the reference code, that will be great. It is.
Yes, I
separated.
think that we have not yet clearly defined, though, what the jurisdiction is for ethics as well. I know that we're working on doing that for the OIG, but maybe I'm misinformed, but I believe that we are not.
We accepted most of the proposed changes from the ethics office, and in the next substitute to this, this is an evolving document, we are going to make certain that we clarify that, because she had asked for it beforehand. She asked for it at the task force. The task force recommended that we provide that clarity, and we did attempt to do that, but we can add more clarity to that.
Okay. Thank you. And I will also state that it does concern me. One of the things that was brought up was the written statement to the board. I understand, but these are ongoing investigations. And is there any way to require confidentiality of some kind of the board? Because my concern is that that information will be communicated outside of those meetings.
I'll use our example. I provide you with confidential briefings on details of information in executive session. That right exists with this board as well. However, the information that the legislation asks to be provided can be determined by their board. So the legislation doesn't spell out the reports, and we would assume it'd be like the same thing I do. I tell you how many investigations I have, I tell you how many cases I have, and I don't necessarily go through all of the who shot John details, but it's a preliminary report. They were not getting any information on how many investigations are open, how many are closed, when they're closed. They couldn't even evaluate how long an investigation had been open, and without it being closed, the information leaves the person who's been investigated in limbo, and some of them are open for years.
Understood. Another piece I did want to also, thank you for that. And I'm trying to move through my questions quickly because I know we don't have time, a lot of time. So my next question is also the piece on 30 days to turn around. That does not, as I see it, allow for undue delays.
That's correct.
A city employee could hold out, they could wait 2 weeks, they could wait 3 weeks, and it would not allow for the OIG to actually do their investigation. So my belief is that we should either change it to 90 days or we should have the clock start once they have their information. I do think parameters, like there should be given a number of days because there are results of investigations that I haven't gotten back and it's been a year. So, but they absolutely 30 days, it's just not enough time without taking into consideration the undue delays that employees could cause.
That is not a problem with regards to the processes and procedures we're trying to do in the situations. And there were several suggestions, Councilmember Bakari, that you gave to us that we would be incorporating in a next revision too. Several of those were not a problem. Most of them, in fact.
Okay. And I wanted to ask a couple questions here that we've also been hearing about in the press a lot, and we also know that the game of telephone is incredibly dangerous. So I would like for it to be explained. One, I would like to know, I would like for a clear answer here. Is it normal for the Inspector General to conduct criminal investigations? And also, can it be explained, the third-party subpoena power, the way it is written as you understand it?
Okay, the first one depends on who the Inspector General is. The Inspector General for the United States government happens to be a criminal Inspector General. It is not an internal administrative affairs Inspector General. There are different types of Inspector Generals all across the country, but in the 14 jurisdictions where we're cities who have them, they vary in a whole lot of power and authority. So it is no such thing as a best practice when you don't have a common practice amongst 14 people. You've got 14 jurisdictions who set it up however you want it to be set up. Now, dealing with the third-party subpoenas, some of this is state law, and Mr. Donald showed you the state law with regard to financial records. So we never envisioned that our Inspector General would take a subpoena form, redact it, alter the subpoena form to tell a financial institution, do not let your creditor know, your account holder know, which is part of the standard statutory process, because she uses that title and the description to make it look like it's criminal. So to answer your question, an administrative subpoena should be following the laws of the state of Georgia.
Okay, and thank you. And also, as the legislation is written, I don't believe that we clearly define highly sensitive information. I also want to note that bank records, medical, and I can't remember the third.
Right, we did financial statements, we did medical records, and we did personal cell phone communications, of which I have several copies of subpoenas of people's personal phone records being
Understood.
requested.
As I understand the legislation, that is not clearly defined as highly sensitive, so if we can also make a note of that. I think, to be fair, thank you, Madam Attorney, I would also like for the OIG to come up. I have a question for Ms. Manigault as well.
And then Liliana, is
Yes,
that the last one?
question. Thank you.
Happy to answer any question, but if
Yeah.
it's a best practice question, I'd love AIG to be able to answer it.
I would also like to ask you a broad question because I have not gotten to hear directly in one room with all of us here, clear answer on, in your assessment, how much oversight should an Inspector General and an Office of the Inspector General have? By whom and under what conditions?
Sure. So my answer to that is an AIG response. The Association of Inspectors General has put out a position paper on this very question about the appropriate level of oversight for an office. The answer is nominal supervision by a committee or an oversight board of exactly the kind that is existing right now with the governing board. So that is the best practice, and that is what we are adhering to.
Understood. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I know I have to let my colleagues answer, but I would like to follow up to be clear to the public on what you just assessed about the answer that you wanted to give in terms of best practices as well with your, did you say age?
So the Association of Inspectors General.
So I want to let people know I'm going to follow up with that. I'm also going to be asking just to better understand how ACRB and APD Office of Professional Standards handles this. So I'm not going to ask that now because we're out of time. I just wanted to be clear that I also follow up with that and that we also follow up on some of the investigations and things I've sent over that I know the office hasn't completed yet. So I just wanted to name that. Our conversation and my conversation with all parties will continue. I just wanted to get those questions out, and I appreciate you coming and answering that. And I know we don't have time, so I'll conclude.
I think next up we had Marcy, Councilwoman Overstreet, and then President Shipman, and then Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Chair Collins. I really just wanted to speak to state the obvious, what I've been saying all along. The City of Atlanta needs an OIG. The process started in, I believe, 2018 with and I was actually the sponsor of the Public Trust Task Force. And out of that task force, it was said that we needed an OIG, an Office of Inspector General. We then went on to hammer through and create the Office of Inspector General. I strongly believe and stand by the fact that the city needs the Office of Inspector General. I really don't understand why it keeps being repeated that the city doesn't want an OIG. I do believe that we do. And I don't think I'm on an island with this. I think we all agree. And out of that, we've had several circumstances that made it clear that we could put in guardrails in our new Office of Inspector General. I don't see anything wrong with that, especially since we're here today. We're holding this work session because we want to make sure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's and calling balls and strikes. That means that we didn't do it perfectly and the office is not being run perfectly, but we all are on the same page that we want a better Office of Inspector General. And I think that we are all here in earnest to make that happen. The most important thing to me is that everyone understands that our employees deserve a workplace that is fair, that is supportive, and most importantly, that they're not afraid of. No one should be afraid of coming to work. No one should be afraid of wondering if their rights are being taken advantage of or if they are being supported by the people that they're supposed to to work for. And that is all that we are trying to do. We're making sure that the workplace is not a place of corruption, abuse, waste, and fraud, and that our employees are supported. Both can be true at the same time. And I'm sure that we can land in the right place with this legislation. I don't think that we're gutting the legislation. I just think that we are clarifying the areas that have been murky. And I'm 100% supportive of the legislation and the process of getting it to the right ending. And I just don't like the conversation around it being either one or the other. Either we want it or we don't. And that's not where we are right now. We are at a place of figuring out how to make it the very best OIG that is good for the city of Atlanta. I want to go on record as saying that I, for one, don't really care if the city council has an appointment on either board. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to fight for an appointment on the board from the city council. At all. I don't mind. Let's agree with that. I don't mind taking that out. The office of that appointment from the city council. Don't mind at all. I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'm just talking about me. What I am here to speak about is taking care of the employees. Let's keep the main thing the main thing. We don't want our employees afraid of having visits in the middle of the night, during the day, at their homes, or not understanding whether or not they can have protections or representation with them when they are being investigated, or if they have information that could help an investigation. We just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think that we can do that. I really do. I think that there are some common sense, intentional pieces of legislation that we can put forth that would absolutely make our OIG better. And that is all we're here to do. And with that, I yield.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Overstreet. Lewis, did you want to go? I know you got, okay. Thank you.
I was doing a little research before I spoke, because some of the comments that came in today were alarming when you look at 3 days ago and trying to make sure we're moving in the right direction. 3 days ago, Mr. Trump fired 17 IGs, and the comment that came out was, it doesn't make any sense. No one can figure out what's driving this list. Then you look at more Republican states, they're taking on the same exact posture as Mr. Trump. I was looking for progressive cities that were doing the same thing, because my goal is to always try to move, at least try to walk with progressive cities across America, and they aren't. And so what they said was, it's very bizarre. There's no unifying theme as to why he chose this group of 17. And I only bring that up because I heard Trump's name so many times in this room, and I want to make sure we're careful in how we're moving as a city, because making sure we're looking at the circle of people who are advising us, because sometimes our circles can be so small that we're only hearing from that circle. And so when I look at I'm listening to the comments, and I'm union strong, I come out the union. I called one of my union mentors this morning before I came here to make sure, while they're in DC right now having that big conference, to make sure I was strong on this conversation before I had it, right? Because I understand the difference between an 18 and the conversation that we're having now, because they've changed all of the grades. It's a new conversation that we're having amongst unions. I understand that in a different kind of way. So I called to make sure we're having the conversation fully, because I couldn't understand why the unions would be, why I would hear this kind of support and being against like somebody making sure it's fair and transparent. And I'd never seen this. And I looked across the nation to see where unions were doing this. And that's why I called DC to make sure before I said this. So I feel strongly in my statements I'm saying, right? Because we fighting the Trump administration. The unions are fighting exactly what he's doing when he's firing these 17 inspector generals 3 days ago, and I had to look that up. So listening to public comment, actually, the goal when you come down here and talk to us, this work session, is so we can hear stuff and hear new stuff, because sometimes, man, people be in silos. I ain't in those silos. I feel like I've been standing with OIG the full weight, just like everybody else here who's saying that we need an OIG. I understand checks and balances. And so when this was created, I wasn't here. I was watching it. And I assumed that Mayor Kasim Reed and the administration at the time period had some changes then that they wanted to make. I assume, just like this administration, just like any other administration, will have some checks and balances, right? Why they looking at my stuff? Get them out of my stuff, right? And so checks and balances. What the first thing I heard today during the first presentation was that the Joint Task Force started as a task force looking at both sides. It ended up only looking at one side. And so my first question was surrounding around that. I think the person that said that was our OIG. So my first question, Ms. Chair, is to my OIG. Did the Joint Task Force begin looking at both sides and it started looking at one side?
For the sake of time, just really quickly, do you mind asking all your questions, and then we'll have a key people come up?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I just want what they had too. I saw some people call some people up.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not changing anything at all. So nothing is going to be limited. Everyone's going to ask their question. I want to make sure that you get everything out so we don't run out of time and you don't feel cheated versus being able to have it. So I want to say, do you mind just asking all your questions so the public can know what you really, as their council rep, needs to say, and then we'll stagger it if that's okay.
I got you. So we'll pause on you because I got a little bit more I want to say.
Yeah, stand right there. Stand right there, Ms. Manigault, please.
All right, so when I agree that Atlanta needs an OIG, I agree that the city of Atlanta, when we created it, we understood that we had to do that, but I also see that the Democratic states are saying that OIGs are under attack nationally. That's what progressive folks are saying, and I'm a progressive. The Terry Simmons, she spoke, I read the letter, and in that letter, she spoke a lot about proposals directly contradicting the 2019 task force recommendations and the current legislation that's created the OIG and strengthened the city's former ethics, transparency, and compliance framework. So this is directly, and it contradicts what they created in 2019. So I'm just making sure that we are getting all of the points out before I ask the questions that I'm going to ask. A few more because we got a lot of information. That's why I feel this is a rush situation. We just got 6 presentations at one time. I'm typically, we heard a union rep, Ms. Gina Paganovi, say, I've never been to what kind of work session was this? To quote her in specifically, what kind of work session is this? We then heard the other union say, we all deserve 2 minutes. So this is a little different type of work session, so I apologize, I'm everywhere because I just heard a lot of stuff at one time, which is why I'm gonna be proposing, I've been talking to council members about us taking our time with this legislation because, man, this is a lot. Got a lot of notes, y'all. All right, so my question first to Ms. McNaught is, I'm ready now. What problems are they trying to solve?
It's as good a question as any. What we've been saying all along is that we've been conducting ourselves in ways that conform with industry standards and best practices, and that there are no genuine issues here. To the extent that there are notions about employee rights, there's only been increased transparency around that. We haven't changed our policy. We've made it more clear what everyone's rights are that we have been adhering to all along. We've been following the work of the industry. There's no problem that we identify that's being addressed here. The legislation that we'd like to see would address the host of issues that I've raised in May before this body and with some of you individually towards the end of the summer, with the hope that we could have legislation that would make this office that everyone says that it wants to support stronger. And to your question about the task force, you'd asked about the obstruction issues. Those were never addressed by that task force that was there ostensibly to help address some of the issues that the office had.
So once again, we created a joint task force to look at both sides. They ended up just looking at one side?
I never understood it to be a joint task force, but yes, they only looked at one side.
Okay, so another reason why I think we need to slow it down, because I accept both recommendations. I do not think that the OIG should be able to do personal phone calls, personal cell phones. So my question to you directly, did you go into a person's personal cell phone or did you use a city cell phone?
We have never searched anyone's personal property. We have never searched anyone's personal devices. Have we issued telecommunications subpoenas? A couple.
And I know I have a city cell phone. I know the moment that this was issued to me is the public's. Anything that comes in and out of this stuff, you can have and go do whatever you want to. So I expect and I use it like that. And I tell all my employees the same thing. So I feel like the administration is going to say that you have went into somebody's personal cell phone. I think they're going to say that. And my question is something I've learned. I want to make sure that I ask specifically because sometimes the wording matters. If I'm using my personal cell phone to conduct city business, does it then become part of public city stuff?
So that's the kind of information and advice that the Chief Transparency Officer gives and talks and gives admonitions about that. We have not conducted an investigation where we have gone into someone's personal phone on that basis. I think that it would be fair because you're trying to get city information, but that is not the basis for any of the conduct that has been raised.
On DeJuan Robinson stuff, I just saw not an elected official, this is a private citizen in the city of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And in May of, trying to find that exact. It's a lot of stuff. That's why we need time. We need time with this. There's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to find the DeJuan Robinson's document right now. And it has his personal bank account that was looked into. And I'm looking at the time period, July 1st, 2021, January 1st, 2021. It's through April 2nd, 2024. Well, so I do know, I don't want to answer any questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your reasoning for going into a private citizen's bank account at that time period?
Right. So this is in connection with a now closed investigation, which is why I can talk about it. It was a subpoena that was issued in connection with an investigation where there were allegations about city employees and bribery. And those individuals who might have been potentially, arguably, paying such bribes. And so it is part of the jurisdiction looking to see the extent to which there's misconduct by a city department or a city employee.
Okay, I appreciate you for explaining that. And my question after that is because closed investigations, because that's one in which we didn't know, we just found out about another closed investigation that we only knew about because of you, would be the HR investigation in which she hired her daughter. Can you talk more about that? Because it's a closed investigation and because today, because I want to make sure folks know the type of scope that you need. And today we saw video for the first time of you going to an employee's home. I want to also talk about something in which, because I've been a person who's talked about some folk, the way folks have been hired in the departments and quality of performance even after they get the job and not going to work when they get the job. And, I'm from Cleveland Avenue. I don't have no cousins. I don't got no big brother or no daddy down here who can get me a job. Or no, my grandma was a city council person. And so I'm asking, I always wanted to get in fair. I remember when and I got a question. I remember when I graduated college, I reached out to Mayor Shirley Franklin. I asked her to help me get a job working in Parks and Rec. I had a degree at Roselle Fan. I wanted to be a basketball coach. She reached out to Keisha Lance Bottoms for me, who was then a city council person. At that time period, Mayor Reed was the mayor. And what came to me, they responded to me, but the job was never available. I was volunteering at that recreation center every single day. And I just knew I was better than some other people worked there, and I was willing to work for whatever they paid me. I just wanted to work for the city and help young folks. Mm-hmm. And so I just remember that happening. And so my question to you around HR, can you talk about what happened to HR? Because that's a real thing, and people in the city of Atlanta, they wonder why they can't get in. And so can you talk about exactly what happened there in that closed case, like the case they brought up earlier?
Sure. So You've raised two issues of the employee rights side of this, right? So the Office of the Inspector General protects and champions employee rights, and that's exemplified by our investigation into the abuses in the Department of Human Resources. That was making sure that there's kind of the level playing field, that all of the processes are followed, and that even with the individual getting the position, that there was not then retaliation against a supervisor, a longstanding city employee of more than 25 years, not punished because she was just making sure that this individual, the daughter, was adhering to city standards. To your question about the approach and the video that was shown today, we've never denied, as the public commenter noted specifically, never denied that we had approached two individuals out of the hundreds of interviews that we've conducted, and that was the video of that where the individual declined to be interviewed, and that was fine because our investigations and our interviews are voluntary.
But can you go more into that HR situation? Because it's a closed case, and we just heard a lot of facts and details. I know too much about Mr. Robinson right now. I consider him a friend. He's a friend of mine. He's been in my house. So I know too much about his bank information, but that's because they made sure we knew about that. I want to know more about something that it leads to a firing of an HR director. And so I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened there. I don't know. So can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So
you can talk. It's a closed case, and they just told us some stuff.
Oh, it
we
is.
Never knew.
I'm cognizant of the time, and I know that.
No, so you had a time period when you were over there as an elected official.
Oh, I'm happy to
I'm not a
give you the
bureaucrat. I'm an elected official. And the people, my folks, I see them in here. They all told me how they want me to stand on this. So I tell you that I'm asking questions based on the community that sent me down here to ask these questions. I want to know what happened with HR. I just told you. I had my experience. I tried to get a job in this city. So tell the folks what's going on.
Agreed. So the circumstances there were that you had the former HR commissioner create a position so that it could be filled by her daughter.
And what department she created a position in?
That was in the office of the city solicitor.
Okay.
And that position then was filled by her. There was a number of processes that were skipped in the process in order to have that individual hired. Once that individual came into the position, upon learning that the individual couldn't telework as early, as soon.
From where?
From unclear, just the coming into the
Florida,
office.
where they said Florida. Telework from Florida for Atlanta, position in Atlanta. How much money per hour? What's the salary?
I don't have that number off the top, but we can certainly get it to you.
Over 50,000?
I believe it might have been, right?
Okay, over 50,000 telework from a position in Florida. I want to make sure HR created a position in the department of, good department. You know, how do we know about this? Who whistleblowed on this? That's the term that they use in other states. It's a democratic city. We don't want to use that term. But who whistleblowed on this?
An employee brought the issue originally to the ethics office. The ethics office thought that it would be appropriate for our office to review. And so then we pursued it to make sure that employee's rights were maintained.
Okay, and I appreciate you for that, but that shows just the different branches. It shows how they have to work together. It shows the independence. It had nothing to do with our mayor. He didn't have nothing to do with that. That was right department head. That was a bad apple, and that's your job, I think, to do it. And so checks and balances to make sure we do this. I think we're moving up really fast on this. And that was my last question for you. I only have one question for one more person here. That's be Ms. Simmons. If possible, Chair and I'll be finished. One question for Ms. Simmons.
She's not here.
I mean, Ms. Nicola Hines. Ms. Nicola Hines. When I see Simmons on here and I know your name, that's why I'm like, was it two different people?
It is two different people. Ms. Simmons is a board member. She couldn't attend today, so I told her I'll speak for her.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. And I know that's why I was like, did I have the wrong name in my mind for you? And so you were speaking a little bit about the letters that came. And I just want to make sure that the task force, and you had to stop because you only got 2 minutes. But
we weren't granted to present the board side.
The task force recommendations that you had and some of the things that came out of it, I'd like you to expand on them. And so if you can, for 2 more minutes, can you tell me how this is affecting your job if they make these changes? And and more about what you were trying to say for that last 30 seconds.
Well, yes, I did send full council, had gotten the board's recommendation or response to the task force recommendations. And as I noted, a lot of it we did agree on because we felt that a lot of them were policies and procedures, not necessarily legislative changes. We did also outline that there was I would say about 6 items that we didn't agree with, but we also feel maybe there was conversations about those pieces. But we also had another about 4 or 5 items that were our concerns that were not addressed by the task force. So that was sent out, and I can re-forward our response if you need that. But in terms of the board itself, if that's your question, I said this at full council last week that we are the gold standard in this country when it comes to our governing board, regardless if it's ethics or IG. I've gone to a lot of IG conferences where people are so excited to hear about us being independent that we don't have any appointees on our board that's from an executive branch, that they love that we are able to do our job without, I just say ethics.
So why are they doing this to you? Why is this happening now to you?
I'm not sure because the only task force recommendation was the split of 2 boards, and the board itself is,
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. What I took from this is similar to Councilmember Bakhtiari, and something that we can, the unions, I think we can push this without, because we need to take our time with this, similar to our salaries that we vote on, we get next year, the next administration gets it. I think even if we vote on this, the next administration, it goes into effect after the election. But for the union stuff, we can fix for you right here, right now, today, because it seems like we all agree upon this part, is that IG should not go to the House without prior permission. And it sounds like that we need an IG Bill of Rights. Those are 2 things that if we have an appetite, we can fix those 2 things right now for our labor partners. The other stuff is a bigger conversation. And I think that we are pushing it too fast right now to me, and then to see all of the boards that are national, these are the progressive boards. These are the folks that fight with us when we fighting Trump. They're saying no to this. And so I want us to make sure we're listening to this fully, and we can fix our labor union issues right there. We're going to make sure that if they have the appetite, we can fix those things. Thank you again.
Excuse me, just point of order really quickly. Then I'll move on to President Shipman. Just for clarity, Councilman Lewis, the 17 IGs that you're referring to are the 17 IGs of the federal government. And so I think it's important to make that distinction because of the 14 jurisdictions that have OIG offices. There's been an evolution over time. So for example, Chicago that has OIGs for 35 years, they have 4 or 5 OIGs for every department. New York City, and we're talking about like, cities that could be comparable in some spaces. New York City has about 20 OIGs. They have an inspector general for every single department. So the police department has one, HR has one, the comptroller office has one. So I do think that there is conversation about the diversity of how Office of Inspector Generals are created, what the evolution of that looks like, and then also when, as Atlanta, as we evolve as a city, there should be some evolution. So I wouldn't expect for us to be at the same space in 2025 that we were in 2019 when the task force made its initial recommendations. So I do want to just put that out for clarity in terms for everybody just kind of understanding the evolution of what it actually looks like on the landscape. President Shipman?
I agree. I agree with you. Once again, I said that I think we needed one. I agree with both sides.
Yeah.
I think that we need some guardrails. I think that there are changes that we can make. It's a living, breathing, growing into this. So I agree with you. But I think that it's rushed. I don't think that we should be doing this right here, right now, today. I think right now we're moving so fast that February 3rd deadline is in my mind while I'm talking and going through this stuff. Because I feel like I have to make a decision too fast. I need a little bit more time with this. So thank you again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. President Shipman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a few questions for the Chief of Staff, Mr. Donald, if he will be over to it. I appreciate the presentation. It provided me at least a lot of clarity. There were a few things I just wanted to follow up on. I'll give you a minute to come up the podium. You pointed out that there seems to be a discrepancy between the code compelling testimony and the OIG's operating procedures that have been published stating that that testimony is voluntary. Does the administration have an opinion on which it should be? Should it be compelled or should it be voluntary in code?
Well, I think we would leave that to the council, but I think we need clarity.
Okay.
So if it is compelled, which it has been so far, I think that we would be able to adjust to that, or continue on in that way with some of the additional adjustments. If it was made voluntary, we would have to do the same thing. But I think the biggest key in that is whatever decision you make, it does not stand alone, because every action has a different reaction, and that is where the problems have come, is that we've made a general decision on the right side, and then on the left side, there are consequences for which we did not contemplate, which is why we're asking for some adjustments here today.
Got it. How important are the mayoral and council appointments to the board, to the administration?
So I think those things are things that we have, recommended or aligned with other folks who want them. But for us, it really looks like your normal process. Most of the boards that you appoint, I think we've heard that these things are, we're appointing folks on a mayoral board, or we're appointing folks on a council board. Well, if you look at all of the other IGs of the 14 that are named, except one, they're actually appointed by the executive and report up through the executive side. We're not asking for that. And so what we're looking for is something that is, again, clear and aligned. And currently, I'll be frank about it, I'm not speaking for the mayor, I'm speaking for me. When I look at the current board and you look at it from an IG's perspective, well, these procurements that we're talking about, these actions, this lack of oversight, even their lack of ability to comply, would be in compliance, which they've been out of compliance for a while, it would say that there needs to be a high level of expertise on that board. Just looking at the SOPs that were presented without board approval and did not go to the board, that means that you leave the OIG to change their SOPs. They could change again tomorrow. So you just issue one on January 5th of 2025. You could do the same thing in February, and those things don't have to have the expertise of the board. That's concerning. And so however we do it, it needs to have a high level of oversight, or let's say, if we're not saying a high level of oversight, and high level of competency of those who make up the board.
As I've contemplated these reforms, I've also looked at the code when it comes to the Atlanta Citizens Review Board. And even though it's a little different because the review board itself is an investigative body, in some ways I think it's similar. You're nodding your head, so I assume you sort of assume the frame. Let me just ask a question. For those who are following along, it's in section 12 of the code. Section 12F says that if there's an investigation by the ACRB, they should have, quote, full access. It goes on to say files, paperwork, and docs. And 12H, it says employees should fully cooperate with those investigations. 12I gives subpoena power, quote, within authority to the ACRB. My question is the administration concerned in the same ways with the ACRB currently? And is there a reform package contemplated for ACRB as well, given that in some ways there is a lot of similarity between the current code as it exists for ethics and OIG as well with ACRB?
Yeah, so I think those are actually very different in the way that they conduct information too. And I've learned some of this as you saw some of the information that's been in the paper about the lack of investigations from the ACRB and things of those nature. We want to make sure that they have the resources and the ability to actually do their job. So I think it is time to give that organization a look to make sure that they can be in compliance as well. But to your question, one thing that I learned from them is that their investigations many times follow, and the information they receive many times follow the investigations of APD. And such, that information is closed. Let's say it's a personnel matter. I'll use Antonio Lewis as an example. I'll start with him. So Councilmember Lewis Councilmember Lewis is engaged in something with APD, it requires some type of investigation, et cetera, et cetera. Well, once that investigation is closed,
Point of order, it's okay.
once that investigation is closed, it would then be all of the data and information would be handed over. So there's still a standard and a process that exists. That standard and process does not exist currently, and that's where the concern is. But we also follow the rule and the letter of the law, and so I would kind of defer to legal when you're asked, a question about that, because that's how we're going to follow what we should have concerns about or not, because liability becomes an issue as well.
So concerning the ACRB investigations, just as an example, but a broader question, are there other areas in which the city provides attorney representation to employees? Are there other instances?
Well, you're asking me questions that are more appropriate for legal.
I'm happy to refer if you get a second to that one. I've got a couple more, Mr. Donald, so maybe.
Yeah, if you want to hold on that one, or if you.
Yeah, let me hold on that one. I'll come back to it. That's fine.
Please.
It seems that a lot of the presentation that you made offers concerns with the current OIG, the person who is the OIG's behavior and decisions. My question is, if that is including violation of state law, as you pointed out, potentially regarding disclosures, if that's the issue, why go through the process of changing the entire policy? Why not just present that to the board and ask that the OIG be disciplined?
So I think there are two answers to that. I think the first one is not certain that the board has taken any role at all in providing oversight over the OIG. I think the second piece is that we don't make decisions on the person that's in the seat. We make decisions and recommendations about the seat. So I think you've characterized it incorrectly. So what I brought to you today is actually about the framework, about the rules and regulations associated, and ultimately the abuse of power associated with not having guardrails. Two very different things. So when you're addressing a lack of guardrails and a lack of institutional controls being in place, it allows someone to operate outside. So while you might point to the instances that were used as examples, we're more focused on the legislation, and those examples were actually provided to you to be able to point out what is happening as a result of not having the appropriate legislation. So I'd provide that clarity to you, sir.
Last question, and then I will ask the question of legal. There is clearly in state law the difference between administrative and criminal. That's a very clear distinction. The Madam City Attorney talked a little bit about this. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that I give you the chance. Do you believe that the OIG for Atlanta should be administrative only in its configuration? Or do you believe it should be criminal in its configuration from an investigative perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, those are the decisions of the council, but I believe that you did it administratively for a reason. And then through this process, another thing that I've learned is that the public trust activities and task force and things of that nature from pre-2020 that were created was focused on the entire ecosystem and identifying a gap. So you already had an auditor, you already have a police department, an investigative body, you have the ACR, the Atlanta Citizens Review Board that you highlighted, you have the auditor, you have all of those things. What was missing was this administrative function that's identified as the OIG. And so that's why we need it, that's why we want it, that's why we all support it. You already have the criminal investigations, environment, body, et cetera, in place, but that one piece, that more than a niche, but that portion that is missing is what you have created. Again, we just believe that the pieces that might be required we've already provided, and you have actually improved, well, the remainder of the body has improved upon and provided substitutions. I think the last thing that I would say, because I think it holds value, and I forgot the gentleman's name, great guy from the Office of the Association of Inspector Generals, had a comment to me that I think makes sense. Look, we're all closer to resolving these issues. There are some that need to be resolved. Get the right people in the room, which I think we're doing here with you guys, you're able to easily resolve these issues, but some of the outside activities and fanfare is causing a challenge. So I'll close with that, and I know you had a
Thank
question
you.
for Attorney Perkins.
That's all my question for you.
Thank you.
Yes, my question is, are there examples in which the city provides representation in disciplinary matters?
Yes, Councilman, we do it on a routinely basis, especially with the police department. We have people not only just representing them at the interviews, if they need representation in the court cases that arise from their behavior, we do that. As Councilman Shook, who was there at the time when the task force recommended this process and recommended that the city attorney's office not be the one that we get outside counsel, Councilman Shook said that's going to be expensive for us to do that, but it is the right thing to do if you don't want our office to do it. Our office currently represents everybody because I'm a dual appointee. And so until someone gets, totally to the point that they kill somebody deliberate or taking some deliberate willful action, we don't handle those, but we represent everybody.
And just for clarity for the body, when is it that the city provides representation vis-a-vis the unions?
Okay, vis-a-vis the unions. The unions have the ability to hire attorneys to represent union workers. And we would always defer to that because they pay union dues for that. But however, a city employee, regardless of whether or not he's a union member or he or she is a union member or not, is entitled to legal representation. And if none is provided, we would step in for that as well, too.
Got it. Thank you so much. I just have one question for the Inspector General, if she would.
I did want to comment on something that we never got a chance to respond to.
Please.
The request, the allegation was that the task force as comprised did not address both sides of the issue, and that's not correct. I was there sitting, where I sit there with you, but Councilman Overstreet and Councilman Shook were there. They heard all of this testimony. They heard written reports and received reports from the National Office Association of Inspector Generals, and they actually spoke to the president of the National Association, the individual members of the task force. He had several calls, several opportunities. The point was they didn't feel that the recommendations that they were making were what they wanted to adopt. They wanted to address the issues the city council raised on process, procedures, and policies, and they looked at it from the concerns you laid out in the resolution. How's it dealing with our employees? That was one of the directives. So they took the directives from the resolution and addressed those. They weren't sitting here trying to figure out how to address all of the issues that the Inspector General did raise. She got a chance to raise them several times. They just didn't agree with them.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Madam Inspector General, just one quick question. The same question that I asked Mr. Donald. Do you believe that the code should compel or maintain that it's voluntary for people to testify in an investigation?
Voluntary. So this is probably one of the key issues about employee rights. That for all of the drum beating about the violation of employee rights, employees have the most important right of all, which is to decline to be interviewed should they wish. So no, for all of our protections, the allowing the attorney, the treating every employee with respect and professionally, the giving them an opportunity to be heard about their various issues and allegations of abuses by the city, that yes, this right to decline to be interviewed is significant. We should absolutely have the right to continue to have voluntary interviews, to not require there be compelled statements. That's the way that it should be. That's the way that it is in the overwhelming majority of the other jurisdictions, though obviously the AIG could speak better to that.
And just for clarity, voluntary, is it all or nothing? They can either participate or not participate, or in your opinion, does voluntary mean they can not answer certain questions, they can stop the interview? I'm just curious for
the latter.
The latter. So it's sort of in any way, shape, or form not
correct.
Participate. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all for me.
Have any questions? Councilwoman Boone? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I would like to open up with no one is perfect. No person, nobody, no organization is perfect. So this is not about hurting, dismantling, throwing rocks, disparaging folks' names and reputations. When I looked at the list of panelists, I saw the name Justice Leah Sears Ward. I saw the name Richard Dean, and I saw Tanya Miller. Those are folks that are known all over the country for fighting for justice and fighting for what's right. And I trusted that they would not give us a document that would try to cover up or hide or do anything that would prevent something good from going on. When I look in the audience and I see union leaders who have given their lives to employees' rights, helping those employees that are homeless, that are living in their cars, that have called me and said, can you help me buy some mattresses? Can you help this employee? His mother passed. I know that they are taking their time to do what's right for thousands of people. Your reputation is all you have in life. Your name is all you have in life. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. It doesn't matter where you live. What bothers me is that right now you have employees that are sitting at home and nobody cares when they'll be back to work. You have employees that belong to churches in this community. You have employees that have to face their mother and their father and their spouses, and they're disgraced, sitting at home, eating and getting fat right now. I've spoken to the administration about this. But when I saw those three names, I said, it'll be okay. Because Tanya Miller, Leah Sears Ward, and Richard Dean, I don't believe they would guide me wrong. I don't believe that they would be here to cover up, sit on this very dais and tell us something that's wrong. So those that feel that we are trying to hurt, dismantle, or do something that's not right for the city of Atlanta, don't feel that way. We just want to make it right. Because you still have to be concerned with folks' reputation and their name. There are documents that were copied and passed out with folks' names on it. That could very easily cause someone to have a nervous breakdown because their families are shunning them right now. Even though they've gotten a letter saying, you're cleared, that person is still at home. Those folks are still at home, but they got a letter, but that wasn't publicized. So this is not about beating up on somebody. Us versus them, or you versus, we beating up on somebody, or it's a war. No, this is our opportunity to get it right. And when I saw those names, look up those folks. They don't play the radio. They're not down here with us to cover up for wrongdoing. Let's make this right for Atlanta. Let's make this right for these union leaders who've been on the back of garbage trucks and they worked their way up to come down here to talk to us about the thousands of people. Let's stop disparaging folks' names and reputations because that's all you have in life is your name. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we kind of round up, I do have a couple of questions, and the first one, the representative from the Association for the Inspector Generals, and Ms. Manigault would love for you guys to answer this. And so one thing that has come up today is the subpoena power piece. And when do we draw the line in terms of any investigation being administrative and being criminal? So when we looked at the subpoena that was given, and then when you see language in a legislation like this that says motion to quash, as an attorney and as a former criminal defense attorney, I automatically switched to a whole different mindset in terms of rights, not only our workers' rights, but also constitutional rights, rules of evidence, but also it seems the nature of this subpoena is almost what a judge would decide if I wanted to get certain information. So talk to us, and so then with that being said, I did go look on the website of I did pull up the principles and standards of the Office of Inspector General, and one of the powers that you do state that you help with is this legal authority to grant OIG specific powers and identify the limits of those powers, such as the power of subpoena for persons or documents, requirements for service of subpoena, confidentiality, and so forth. Can you share with us what is a common practice or what we've seen in terms of what we've been clear as our vision and mission for the Office of Inspector General here for the City of Atlanta, and where do we draw the line? Where does the actual officer draw the line and switch from an administrative to a criminal investigation?
Right. Okay. So the common practice across the nation, I think very clearly, is that inspectors general are given administrative subpoena authority on their signature. I've had it for many years. I've probably done 70 or 80 of them. Those that are attorneys have probably heard the term friendly subpoena. That's what generally administrative subpoenas are referred to. Many times we need information from a vendor or somebody doing business with the city. They're kind of a little squeamish about releasing it, but they want a subpoena when they know we have the authority to do it. So we issue an administrative subpoena. I'd say 9 out of 10 are responded to immediately, and they're fine. And the reason that they like them, and this is important, if you're running a business, you really don't want your business name popping up in the database for the court system as being subpoenaed. So they really like friendly subpoenas. They want to give the information. They're just looking for the judicial cover. When you transition is when someone does not wish to respond to the administrative subpoena, which has happened to me many times and it happens to IGs. That is when we switch to the judicial piece traditionally, and then we petition the court to issue the subpoena. Usually it's the exact same subpoena rolled over to the court system. Then the judge issues it, and then it becomes something that is enforceable through the court system. So it's just that's the simplistic, most common application. So in that environment, whenever someone chooses not to comply with the administrative subpoena, the IG's only option is to go to the courts because the IG can't enforce the subpoena but for the court ordering it. The administrative is just a quicker stop in the process that works most of the time under mutual agreement. And the situation with the judicial subpoenas vary somewhat jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but typically you got to go sit with the court. And if it's something in the jurisdictions I've been in where it is confidential and they have the power under the state law to not make notifications, we have those in-chamber discussions. This is why it's ongoing. They don't know that we know yet. We need to look at this account, whatever the case may be. The judge makes that decision. Sometimes they're with us, sometimes they're not. But that's the normal practice in the IG community.
And so with this subpoena piece here, like the example that was shared with us, this operates as a court order, which is why the bank, once they received it, looked at it just that way. So would it be, for me, I think my question is, this kind of crosses the line in terms of going beyond what an administrative subpoena should be, and something that really truly the law enforcement agency should be aware of, particularly when it's third party or outside or citizens of Atlanta, which was shocking for me to learn.
Quite frankly, I haven't seen that. I probably couldn't have read it on my best day, and I got glasses now from here.
But
that I think is a perfect example. What I'm saying that the laws in different states change, and if the state requires a transition at a certain thing, this should always be judicial. Then it should always be judicial. I don't know the lay of the land here. The one thing I will say, just to follow up on that, What all of our principles and standards that are legal in scope are designed to do is to assure that the office is operating lawfully in the jurisdiction in which they're working. I will say that sometimes people don't like the lawful execution of an OIG, make it say a subpoena. So a jurisdiction may have a subpoena process that operates like I explained, but they're all of a sudden shocked and surprised when an IG goes and gets a court-ordered subpoena because that's something that they're not used to. IGs are very unique in that sense. Many other jurisdictions, although I heard a reference to one earlier, AC something, ACR maybe, that can go and get subpoenas. But oftentimes when a new office starts, the issuance of subpoenas shocks people a little bit because they're thinking administrative without realizing that administrative is a very legitimate space for subpoenas. And also, well, I don't want to get too far astray, but also the conversation that I heard earlier about the transition into criminal, which I think you're hinting at, is very common in the AIG space. That is one of the things that we do very well, is transitioning between administrative and criminal. I believe I'm correct in stating that this office, the city OIG office, is a criminal justice agency. It's not a designation a lot of people are used to hearing. It doesn't come with badges and guns and arrest authority, but it comes with the ability to access confidential and privileged criminal databases. I had an office very similar to this for about 9 years, and some of the cases that we worked ended up being federal cases where we were on the 6E list and working jointly with the FBI or other federal authorities. So my point is that conversation of transitioning and when it becomes appropriate is a multi-tiered assessment.
Right.
Sometimes it's all living in the IG's office, and sometimes we're partnering with somebody else. So that was, I just wanted to throw that out there.
And so if there is opportunity to revise this legislation to lend more to the partnering side, that does not make this legislation out of compliance, nor does it limit the power of our Office of Inspector General.
Assuring, and I am 100% certain the AIG will be very, very supportive of it, but assuring that the office has the authority to make recommendations to other agencies, to refer matters to other agencies, is a must. I mean, it's a positive for us. When that goes out, the responses may be, thank you, we've got it. I've had that happen, and you don't hear anything. I heard somebody talking about the long time between institution of a case and the finish. That's something we all struggle with, and I have personally had this happen. I start an administrative case. It develops into something that's criminal. We refer it to a federal authority or sometimes a state authority. They take it, but we're not a partner in it. They just take that referral. They will tell us, you have to freeze it. You have to stay your action, and you can't tell anybody that we have it. So I'm sitting there with an open case number, maybe somebody that I've interviewed, and I know it's being worked by another authority, and under their direction, I can't release it. So sometimes you will see these I'm not saying they're always right. I'm just saying sometimes you will see these long pauses in a case, and it's the result of a legitimate referral that's been picked up by another entity. It's just, there's lots of tiers on how this can go, which is why, this conversation is incredibly important, because there's very rarely a one fix to any issue, and the subpoena is a perfect example.
Right. So I appreciate your example, and the only reason why I do appreciate that, because what it does, because what it shows is that other agencies that have certain powers but also have certain expertise should be able to do a deeper dive into a criminal investigation, particularly when you're talking about someone's legal rights or constitutional rights, possibly being, that you're talking about it can lead to an arrest, it can lead to multiple indictments. And so I do think it's important for us to understand where that line is drawn, but also what we want to see out of the Office of Inspector General. And that partnering, that relationship piece, I would imagine that it would come from if everyone is collectively working together to eliminate abuse, waste, fraud, and corruption, then it shouldn't be a concern in terms of the communicative piece of ensuring that investigation goes through.
Yeah, just to reiterate that once we make those referrals, we often lose control of the case, but we still have the responsibility of maintaining confidentiality. It is most common, I think, for the federal authorities to say, thank you, we got it, don't say anything. Sometimes we are actively in it, but in those circumstances, just to show you another real life example, when we are working something jointly with another agency, and especially the feds, they will conduct all of the decision-making and all of the interviews. We typically will not be in the room because that has transitioned over, and they're now working under criminal rules. This office, my old office, is working under administrative rules, but we are a supporting entity for the criminal case. So all of these things can create situations that make people's heads spin and make, they get the rumor mill going, and it can be true, and it can also be lawful at the same time that it's something nobody's seen before, and it causes a lot of consternation. And that's really the piece that we try to advocate a lot, is that you have to give the IG the space to create a policy that has all those potential components available, and give them, if you give them too narrow, then you're ruling out some of their ability. That's it.
Thanks. The other question I just have in terms of the governing board and the relationship with the office of and with the actual office, and I don't know if this was one for Mrs. Manigault to talk about, and also Ms. Hines that is here, because I know Ms. Hines is the chair of the governing board that is under the Office of Inspector General, but it seems to be operating in I would think that the governing board and the chair of that board would be working collectively with the actual Inspector General and the office. And so if you all can help me understand, as being new to this, how is that not? Because and you made a request to present to us specifically, and then I mean the thought says, well, if you're the governing board of the Office of Inspector General, how are you all not working collectively together in terms of governance and process of the actual office?
Right.
So
Good question, and one that is subject of a lot of discussion whenever we're helping an agency build inspectors general. So if you look at the ethics function as a counterbalance or a contrast to the IG, it may be helpful. So under ethics, that board has quasi-judicial functions. They render findings on things. So ethics does an investigation, they look at it, they may find somebody at fault or not at fault. None of that happens on the Inspector General side. That board is there in most jurisdictions as a body that receives the final report of the Inspector General on any case. They are there to oversee the Inspector General from an efficiency and effectiveness component. So common responsibilities of those boards are conduct an annual performance review, make sure that you get a good annual report, monthly reports if you wish to do so, which is what I used to have to do. And those reports, I heard this mentioned earlier, they track how many open cases do you have, how many are new, how many are closed. Sometimes big buckets I've seen in there, like, what departments are involved or things like that can be in those. They kind of vary. But they do not have, and this is the fundamental piece, those boards should not ever have operational knowledge of an ongoing case beyond the case number and the broad type. So once you make that leap, it's very easy to understand why the board is not in a position to quash a subpoena or to engage in some sort of an appeal or some complaint about an ongoing investigation. The board's primary oversight, beyond making sure that the monthly stuff is going on, approving budgets, is really digging into those final reports. And that's something I think that everyone here needs to really understand. Nothing an IG reports out on will ever show up in the newspaper without every leader in the city that's involved in that report having at least 30 days notice. They get a report, they get the ability to respond to it, those types of things. This is the standard practice.
Okay, standard practice, okay.
Right? And then when that report is finalized, then it is released out publicly, usually within 5-7 days of the final issuance, which is, I have now delivered it to my governing board. Then there's a layover period of a handful of days usually, and it issues publicly. Prior to that, the governing board doesn't have any operational knowledge of what's going on in that report, but once they've got it, their next meeting, it's typical for the IG to present that report, and that's when they really dig in. Why did you do this? Talk to me about the foundation for that. And that's the best way for those boards to engage, and that's a way for them to send a signal, we're not happy or we don't understand why you've taken certain moves. And also an opportunity for them the IG, to answer questions about things like employee notifications, all of those things that are all legitimate that people are talking about. That's the opportunity. And if you look at it that way, there will be probably a dozen incidents a year where a final report will be finished, and they'll be able to dig into the what, whys, and hows of what the Inspector General did. Shannon, I think did you want to say something? I don't want to monopolize.
And we'll take the last comment and then we'll close it out.
Thank you.
So I do want to make it very clear, we do get reports from both offices before our board meeting, almost a whole week before our board meeting. So we are able to see the closed reports. They also give us the information of what's still open, what's pending, with, in a loose sense, like we said, because it's confidential information based on investigations. But we do get that information. We do have the oversight, and we have the ability to question anything that comes in front of us. So I've heard a lot that we don't have oversight, we aren't involved, we don't get reports. That's incorrect. We do get those reports on a regular basis. The reason why I asked is because, as you know, in one of my letters, we did say we had concerns about Article 8 and Article 9 overall. Because we have had both the information of both task force information, and as we did before, we gave our line by line of the 2024 task force recommendations, and we were lining that up with what the legislation said. So we wanted to kind of present as the board, these are our overall concerns, not just the board's sections, but also the overall concern of the overall legislation as the board's presenting it and seeing it. So that's why I had requested maybe to give more time so we can actually go through those, and where we saw the contradictions. We are the oversight board where we see that, hey, these are not addressing the issues that we've presented. That's the reason why.
Got it. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay. Ms. Manigault, did you want to add anything before we?
No, I don't think so.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I know we're at time. There's another event that's scheduled to start shortly after this. I want to, with Chairman Shook, want to thank everyone for attending today. We had 13 of our 13 councilmen that was present for today's work session, asked great questions and have all the information that we need. Thank you, administration. Thank you to Office of Inspector General. Thank you, Jabu, and your team at the Ethics Office. We truly appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. With that, this work session has been adjourned. Thank you.